In a grand ceremonial scene, a massive crowd gathers before a magnificent palace-like structure, cheering enthusiastically for the emperor and the saint, pleading for her blessings. A stunningly beautiful woman with long, flowing blonde hair appears to express her gratitude to the loving crowds, wishing from the bottom of her heart that they be overwhelmed with blessings and love. Her identity is revealed as Saint Dorothy, as she prays for their peace. Dorothy reflects on her prestigious status as the saint of the Manpelin Empire. The narrative emphasizes that everyone in this empire loves and reveres her. However, despite this unanimous adoration, there is only one person who does not share these feelings. The scene shifts as Dorothy moves toward a dark, imposing hall while a guard announces her arrival to His Majesty. Dorothy advances with steady steps, the echo of her footfalls resonating in the absolute silence of the place, an atmosphere in stark contrast to the joy that surrounded her moments ago. A man with dark hair appears, dressed in royal attire with a mysterious smile, announcing that he has been waiting for her. This man is identified as Emperor Theodore Eliot, the ruler of the Manpelin Empire, known among his people as a wise and benevolent ruler who is kind beyond measure, making his current attitude toward the saint even more suspicious. Emperor Theodore begins by questioning Dorothy's identity, wondering aloud if it is right to call her saint. Admitting his confusion, which causes Dorothy to feel flustered, he presses her with the question of what he should call her, revealing himself to be the only person in the empire who intensely loathes the word saint. The emperor presents Dorothy with two stark choices, asking mockingly whether she is a saint or a fraud. Dorothy realizes with determination that her mission in this religious state is to win over this man, who not only disbelieves in the gods but hates them, to her side, all to achieve her ultimate goal, to live an ordinary life. Memories from her previous life begin to surface, where her name was Park Seon-yo, born as the daughter of a shaman and possessing spiritual powers, while her mother constantly urged her to accept the gods. Her mother's warning echoes in her mind, that misfortune would follow her if she knew the words of the gods and refused to follow them. Despite all warnings, Park Seon-yo hated the shaman life and was often mocked because of her name's association with her mother's profession, causing her deep pain and a desire to escape her fate. Fed up with gods and spirits, she declares her intention to live a normal, ordinary life like everyone else. In an attempt to rid herself of her spiritual nature, she believes changing her name might be the solution and heads to the district office to submit the necessary paperwork. While on her way, filled with hope for a new beginning, a tragic and sudden accident occurs, turning everything upside down. Park Seon-yo finds herself lying on the ground bleeding, wondering in her final moments if this is the end. In those last seconds, she reflects on her past, thinking that an early death was better than becoming a shaman. But now, facing real death, she feels intense fear and clings to life. She is overwhelmed by regret, thinking that if she had believed in the gods, she might not have died in such a meaningless and painful way. As her consciousness fades, she hears voices calling the name Dorothy, and she suddenly opens her eyes. She wakes up to find herself in a lush green field in a state of total shock, wondering what just happened. She touches her head in confusion, questioning if she really died, as she is still alive and well, which only increases her disorientation. She clearly remembers the traffic accident, but finds herself completely unharmed, making her wonder anxiously what actually occurred. Her confusion grows as she observes her strange surroundings, looking up to see a massive castle with unfamiliar architecture, her eyes widening in shock. She stares at the stunning city around her, completely lost, her mind echoing a single question: where the hell is she? Then she realizes the shocking truth. When she opened her eyes after the accident, she had been transported to a completely different world. Everything seems strange and surreal. Even the reflection of her face in the water belongs to someone else. Seeking answers, she decides to head toward a nearby town where she sees people, hoping to find some clarity amidst the chaos. In her confusion and displacement, the girl wanders around the strange place, wondering who she can ask to guide her in this unknown world. Her eyes catch a man in a uniform sitting at a desk and writing, so she guesses he might be a policeman she can turn to. But she soon realizes that reaching him won't be easy, as a long line of people stands before him. Nevertheless, she decides that asking him is the best way to understand her current situation. A sense of frustration creeps in as she wonders if there is an information center, but she eventually gives in to reality and decides to join the queue. She contemplates her surroundings again, confirming that this place is neither a movie set nor just a dream, which increases her bewilderment about the nature of this world. She notices that the people's features and language do not seem Korean at all, yet for some mysterious reason, she can understand what they are saying, adding a new mystery to her complicated situation. When her turn finally comes, the man in uniform invites her forward and she gathers her courage. to explain her predicament. She tries to tell him she is lost, but he interrupts her sharply, asking her to state her name first. Hesitantly, she utters her name from her previous life, Park Seon-yo, but the man misunderstands or mishears it, believing she said, Saint. The man and his colleague burst into loud laughter, whispering mockingly that she claims to be a saint, leaving her in a state of shock and disbelief. The man continues his mockery, pointing out that her name is Saint, a word that only appears in foundational myths, while she screams internally, trying to correct the mistake, explaining she said Seonnyo and not Seongnyo, which means saint in Korean. After his laughing fit subsides, he hands her some papers and offers to take her to a temporary shelter since his shift has ended. She tries to object, asking him to take her home, but finds herself following him without realizing it. The man tells her that luckily a temporary shelter has been allocated for nameless homeless people. She continues trying to tell him she isn't homeless, but her words go to the wind. Suddenly, she hears a mysterious voice calling the name Rothy, which sparks her surprise and wonder. As she continues walking, she hears the guards talking about the new emperor who cares even for the homeless, which has increased the burden on the guard unit, so she wonders if she misheard. She tries to convince herself she is imagining strange things because of the chaos surrounding her since waking up in this world. Carrying the papers in her hand, she contemplates the new place she has reached, feeling that everything happening around her is mysterious and unexplainable. They finally reach a room where the guard tells her she can use it, handing her a key and a blanket while ignoring her repeated questions about what this place is. The guards continue giving her instructions about returning the key and receiving a confirmation voucher upon departure, completely ignoring all her pleas and attempts to inquire, leaving her feeling deeply frustrated. Her frustration grows as she feels totally helpless to explain her situation, and the mysterious voice in her head escalates, clearly calling the name Dorothy, causing her to lose control of her nerves. She screams at the guards, angrily demanding to know who Dorothy is that they keep calling her, leaving them bewildered. The guards seem confused by her sudden outburst and ask her to calm down, insisting they hear nothing. She points insistently and asks them to listen carefully, wondering how they cannot hear the voice calling her Dorothy. The two guards exchange concerned looks, believing she is unwell. They suggest calling a doctor, then decide to leave her to rest and quickly exit the room. She feels lonely and frustrated as she sees the door close behind them, realizing they are treating her as an eccentric person. Then the voice addresses her directly and clearly as Dorothy, asking if she can hear it. And in that moment, she realizes she is the only person capable of hearing this mysterious voice. A bright celestial light overwhelms her, and the voice reassures her that it understands her confusion after her sudden awakening in this world, asking her to calm down and listen to what it has to say. The light gradually manifests into a mysterious figure, and she asks with a trembling voice about the identity of this being. An ethereally beautiful woman with white hair appears before her, wearing a shimmering white gown, and gently apologizes for the delay in introducing herself. A majestic woman radiating celestial light manifests before her, holding a spear while floating in the air surrounded by a halo of light. The ethereal woman introduces herself, announcing her name is Agatha. Agatha reveals her true identity, explaining that she is a goddess who protects this empire. Looking at her with a calm and confident smile, the girl feels stunned. After finally accepting she had moved to a new world, she finds this new development surpasses all her imagination. A sense of despair washes over her, the one thing she wanted to avoid more than anything in her new life, after her previous suffering with the spirit world, was meeting a goddess face to face. Goddess Agatha expresses her astonishment and overwhelming joy, shouting with delight because the girl can actually see her, which surprises the girl even more. Agatha approaches her enthusiastically, telling her she is a mysterious being who appeared from nowhere and can communicate with and see her, describing her as the amazing Dorothy. But Dorothy asks her to stop for a moment, trying to process the situation. Agatha continues expressing her extreme excitement, saying she has never met anyone like her before, and moves closer, prompting a terrified Dorothy to push her away, begging her not to come any closer. Terror takes hold of her, as this is the first time she has seen a real god, and her old fears of being possessed by a spirit take control. Agatha notices Dorothy's panic and tries to calm her, but a strange sound suddenly erupts, making the goddess herself stop in confusion. Suddenly, the majestic goddess shrinks to the size of a small child. Dorothy stares in amazement, finding her new form quite cute. Agatha, in her miniature form, apologizes, explaining that her divine power has weakened, making it difficult to maintain her full form. She then takes the opportunity to introduce herself properly, confirming she is Agatha, one of the guardian deities of the Manpulin Empire. Upon hearing the Empire's name, Dorothy's eyes widen in shock as she knows the name very well. She is stunned to realize that this name is not foreign to her. It is the name of the Empire where the events of a romance novel she had read in her previous life take place. She remembers it was an ordinary fantasy romance novel revolving around a love story between a viscount's daughter from the countryside and a count who had never opened his heart to anyone. Although the story was traditional, what attracted her to follow it was the character of Emperor Theodore Eliot, who was an old friend of the Count, the novel's hero. Her admiration for the Emperor was not for his person, but for his actions which piqued her interest, as he personally led a scientific revolution to modernize the empire that was deeply mired in religiosity. She recalls how the novel was full of energy and life characteristic of transitional historical stages, driven by new cultures and scientific technology. Because of her weariness of shamanism and religion in her past life, she strongly sympathized with the Emperor's reforms, and this story had breathed life into her. She returns to her bitter reality, realizing she is now trapped in the world of that novel, while Agatha calls out to her anxiously. Agatha tries to calm her, noting that her facial expressions are scary and reassuring her that there is no immediate danger. But Dorothy completely rejects this talk. The presence of a strange goddess clinging to her is a great danger in itself. And above all, she remembers a terrifying detail about the Emperor in this novel. She remembers that after he lost his family to a plague that swept the empire, he began to hate the state religion, male Taku, intensely. Terror grips her as she imagines her fate if the Emperor discovered her ability to see a goddess in such a world, realizing he might order her execution immediately. Despair overwhelms her. She has just returned from death and cannot risk dying again because of a goddess. Her despair turns into resolve, and she makes a decisive choice to do whatever it takes to survive. She suddenly screams, declaring that she has absolutely nothing to do with the gods, in a desperate attempt to deny her new reality. Later, she sits in the shelter before a bowl of soup, but she cannot even swallow her food after everything she has been through. She concludes that her name in this body is Dorothy, and since she doesn't remember this character from the original novel, she must be an extra or marginal character. But the bigger problem now is the little goddess who won't stop following her, even sitting on her food bowl, wondering sadly why Dorothy is suddenly pretending she can't hear her. While she is lost in thought, trying to ignore the goddess, a sudden noise catches her attention as a group of rough-looking men approach her. A man with a boorish appearance approaches and mockingly asks if she is alone, while the others behave like bandits, sparking Dorothy's anger and resentment. Meanwhile, the little goddess Agatha appears and shouts at them to stop bothering her young lady, but Dorothy wonders to herself why this alleged goddess appeared so weak. The man continues his sweet talk, suggesting that if she feels cold and lonely in this inn, she can come looking for him anytime, identifying himself as Alexander, and insisting he would always welcome her with a smirk. The men surround Dorothy, increasing her sense of distress. She wishes secretly they would just disappear so she could eat her meal in peace. Meanwhile, Agatha becomes furious and scolds the man for his insolence, demanding he repent and then calling him Jean. Dorothy is surprised by this name, as the man had said his name was Alexander. Agatha reveals to Dorothy that the man's real name is Jean, and that he uses a pseudonym because he has an inferiority complex since his name sounds like a girl's name, boasting that as a goddess, she can see the truths people hide. Despite not fully trusting Agatha, Dorothy realizes this is her only chance to get out of this predicament. She gathers her courage and calls the man Jean, causing him to freeze in place with absolute shock on his face. The man's companions ask about the identity of Jean, and if that is her name, praising the beauty of the name while he panics. The man wonders in terror how she knew this name that only his grandmother knows. After a moment of confusion, the man jokingly claims she is a funny lady, then moves suddenly and urges his companions to go eat, even though they had already eaten, dragging them away in a hurry. Dorothy watches them leave, realizing with amazement that the goddess Agatha actually possesses real powers. Agatha proudly comments on their easy departure, guessing they have regretted their actions. Then she turns to Dorothy to check on her, asking anxiously if she is okay, and Dorothy answers hesitantly. Agatha apologizes very gently, expressing her regret as the guardian goddess of the Empire for such an incident happening to Dorothy, who had just arrived in this world. Dorothy notes to herself that this goddess is unexpectedly kind. Dorothy remembers that the gods she knew in her previous life were never friendly toward humans. On the contrary, they tortured her throughout her life because she refused to accept the divine call to become a shaman. Even after her mother became a shaman, her suffering continued, as her mother claimed the gods ordered her to climb the mountain every day and perform 3,000 bows until her knee cartilage wore out. Confusion takes over Dorothy. In her belief, gods are supposed to be cruel. So why is Agatha so worried about her? Driven by this confusion, Dorothy decides to ask Lady Agatha a question, and the little goddess welcomes her question enthusiastically. Dorothy asks hesitantly, her eyes full of fear from her past, if she had come here to torture her. Agatha is shocked by this question and shouts in protest, asserting that the idea of torturing her is ridiculous and impossible. After this confrontation, the two talk a lot, and Agatha succeeds in gradually dispelling Dorothy's fears and anxieties. Agatha assures Dorothy that she has no reason to torture her and certainly no intention of taking over her body, which relieves Dorothy. After calming down, Dorothy wonders about the real reason Agatha appeared to her in the first place, reminding her of the favor she had asked for earlier. Hesitation and confusion appear on Agatha, as she mutters that it might be a bit difficult. Then, suddenly and impulsively, Agatha blurs out her request to deliver the voice of God to the Emperor. Dorothy freezes in place, completely shocked, processing that she is now being asked to deliver the voice of God to the Emperor of the Empire, the man who hates religion and gods more than anyone else. Dorothy's amazement reaches its peak, wondering to herself how she is asked to deliver the god's voice to a man who hates them blindly, considering this request no different from being sent to her death. Agatha tries to calm her down, explaining that the Emperor is under a major misunderstanding regarding the gods, adding that the problem is magnified by the widespread corruption in the temple, which has significantly weakened their divine power. The little goddess begs Dorothy to help them remove this misunderstanding, but Dorothy, still in shock, wonders in silence why she was chosen for this impossible task. Agatha continues to persuade her, asking her to convince the Emperor to work with them for the prosperity of the Empire. But Dorothy, feeling the weight of the situation, ignores her and begins devouring her soup with frantic speed. The goddess hovers around her anxiously, telling her she will get indigestion if she continues eating that way. After finishing her food, Dorothy sets the bowl aside with a forced smile and decides to pretend she didn't hear any of this, affirming to herself that she flatly refuses to suffer because of gods in this life too. As night falls, Dorothy walks down the dark hallway, feeling sorry for Agatha, but convincing herself she has no choice. She doesn't even know how to manage her own life in this new world yet, so how can she help others? As she lies in bed, she continues thinking about the impossibility of the matter. After all, she is just a homeless person, so how can she get an interview with the Emperor? She finally decides to sleep and think of a plan tomorrow. Before she can close her eyes, a sudden crashing sound is heard as the bed suddenly collapses under her, and she screams in terror, wondering where the sound came from. Dorothy sits amidst the wreckage of the bed in confusion, wondering how a bed that seemed perfectly fine could break like this. And suddenly Agatha appears, expressing extreme concern for her. Agatha immediately apologizes, explaining that what happened was likely due to a tantrum from their Knight Commander, leaving Dorothy surprised by her sudden appearance, but quickly focusing on the strange term she used. Agatha explains that there are 8 gods protecting this empire, and just like her, their divine powers have weakened significantly. The goddess continues, explaining that Dorothy's presence has restored some of their power, allowing them to begin using their influence slightly again. She clarifies that the Knight Commander, in the midst of all this, had become angry, believing Dorothy wouldn't help them, so breaking the bed was a slight expression of his displeasure. Dorothy is shocked and shouts in protest, realizing that her special nature is once again the reason for these supernatural events, just as it was in her previous life. Agatha apologizes on behalf of the Knight Commander, asserting he didn't mean to actually break the bed. Dorothy asks in wonder how she can talk to them if they are invisible, and Agatha explains that their true forms exist in the divine world, and that they are all gathered now. Terror grips Dorothy as she thinks of the dire consequences. If just one of them being annoyed leads to a bed breaking, what would happen if she refused to cooperate and truly angered one of them? She realizes in a moment of fear that her life might be in real danger if she doesn't help them. After moments of internal struggle, Dorothy sighs in resignation and decides that survival is most important. She reluctantly declares her agreement, sparking joy in Agatha, who couldn't believe what she heard. Agatha thanks her, warmly, explaining that if their divine power had continued to weaken, they would have disappeared entirely. But Dorothy thinks to herself sarcastically, believing the world might be a better place if the gods simply vanished. Dorothy is surprised when Agatha responds as if she read her mind, apologizing for the burden she is placing on her, but warning her that if the gods vanish, chaos will engulf the world. She continues by explaining that with their disappearance, the spirits that rule nature will also vanish, and without these spirits, the natural world order will collapse. Eventually, the human race will slowly wither and die. Dorothy is shocked by this horrifying truth, realizing the matter is much worse than she imagined. Dorothy recalls the events of the novel and remembers that it didn't describe the world in detail after its end. She concludes that if Agatha's words are true, a world that stopped believing in gods after the Emperor's reforms must have suffered massive natural disasters. She finds herself before two bitter choices. The chances of her dying while serving the gods are unknown, but if the world ends, her chance of dying is 100% certain. Having made up her mind, her eyes shine with determination, and she declares she will do her best from now on. Agatha rejoices at her enthusiasm and promises to help her achieve anything she wants if she succeeds in convincing the Emperor. The goddess asks her about her desire, and whether she aspires to wealth, fame, or a comfortable life. But Dorothy, returning to the memories of her past life and suffering, desires only one thing. Her only wish is not to see things others cannot see and to become a completely ordinary person, like the people she sees on the street every day. She realizes her wish hasn't changed between her past life and this one, but she decides it's better not to disclose it now because it would seem like she is rejecting the guardian gods. Therefore, she tells Agatha she can't think of anything right now and will tell her later what she wants. Agatha enthusiastically agrees, telling her one wish is not enough and that she will grant her 2 wishes as long as they aren't evil. Dorothy accepts the offer, thinking to herself that it's great to think of another wish in the meantime. But she soon returns to reality and draws the goddess's attention to the fundamental problem. How is she supposed to meet the Emperor in her current state as just a homeless person and a character not even mentioned in the original novel? She sits on her broken bed thinking about the available options, realizing that going to the temple and declaring herself a saint would be the easiest path. But she hesitates because the Emperor hates the temple, guessing that in this case, he would likely avoid her. Then she realizes that him avoiding her would be the best possible scenario. Considering his actions in the novel, there is a high probability he might eliminate her along with the temple all at once. After deep thought, she reaches a decisive conclusion. The only way left for her is to become famous. She explains her plan to Agatha, clarifying she will spread rumors until every child in the street knows of a saint's appearance. Once she becomes famous, the Emperor won't be able to touch her easily, and her chances of meeting him will increase. Fame will be her shield against the Emperor, and if she wins the people's love, it will be an additional gain. Agatha agrees that the idea is great and asks her about the specific method of implementation. Dorothy's eyes shine as she thinks of a way and tells the goddess she already has an idea. Then she turns to her with a cunning smile and asks her to help a little. The next day, in the front yard of the homeless shelter, Dorothy approaches a group of elderly people and greets them. She introduces herself as Dorothy and tells them she hasn't stayed here long, then politely asks if she can join them. An elderly couple welcomes her warmly, telling her they would be happy with her company if she doesn't mind spending time with old people like them. Dorothy thanks them, then whispers to Agatha, asking her to look for anyone who looks particularly worried or troubled. Immediately, Agatha points to a woman sitting nearby. She draws her attention to the woman's legs, where Dorothy sees dark energy swirling around them, wondering if her seeing these things is due to Agatha's influence. Agatha explains that the woman's skin is rotting because of an evil piece she carries with her, and the word evil piques Dorothy's curiosity. Having identified her target, Dorothy decides to take this opportunity to make a strong impression. She approaches the woman and calls her by name, Mrs. Lynette. Dorothy asks Mrs. Lynette if her legs are okay, and the woman freezes in place from shock. Mrs. Lynette wonders in confusion how the girl knew her name and how she knew about her leg pain, which wasn't visible to the eye. Dorothy continues her talk, telling her that doctors were unable to find the cause, accurately describing how her skin started to blacken and rot, preventing her from sleeping, and expressing her regret for the suffering she is going through. Mrs. Lynette's panic increases as she wonders how she could know all these details, while others look on in shock. Dorothy smiles to herself, realizing her plan is succeeding. Dorothy approaches Mrs. Lynette and asks her to allow a word in her ear. She whispers that the fake ruby she picked up from the bar is the cause of everything, and orders her to get rid of it immediately. Mrs. Lynette is stunned, wondering again how she knew about the ruby. Dorothy smiles confidently and tells her that the basis of divination is word of mouth, then urges her to go and spread what happened. A few days later, people see Mrs. Lynette walking much healthier and ask how her legs improved after the doctors failed. Mrs. Lynette tells them the credit goes entirely to a saint named Dorothy, who recently moved into room number 3 on the 2nd floor. Rumors spread quickly, and people begin flocking to Dorothy. In one scene, Dorothy tells a man who came to her that he came because he has pain, and the man is shocked by her knowledge. She reveals to him that his ancestors are angry because he was secretly trying to sell the family inheritance, warning him not to do it again. The man panics and admits their circumstances were difficult, but promises he will never sell the inheritance. Later, the man shows his completely healed arm to another woman, telling her he did exactly what the saint said. So the woman decides to go see her too. Thus, the fame of Saint Dorothy began to spread everywhere. Dorothy's reputation spreads like wildfire among the common people as they talk about her amazing abilities, how she reveals the problem before the person even sits down, and mention how Norman, who suffered long, was healed just by meeting her, establishing in their minds that she is a true saint. In her room, Agatha expresses extreme admiration for Dorothy's ability to solve people's problems with such precision, noting that the high priests themselves cannot receive such detailed messages. But Dorothy responds humbly, asserting that without Agatha's help, she would have been treated as nothing more than a fraud. Despite her success, Dorothy realizes that being a famous person in a homeless shelter is not enough to achieve her goal, and begins thinking of a way to reach more influential figures, like nobles, for example. As if fate responds to her thoughts, her thinking is interrupted by the entry of 3 men wearing luxurious clothes, which sparks her surprise. The man in the middle, who has an aristocratic appearance, steps forward and asks her directly if she is the saint the rumors speak of. Agatha whispers in her ear, confirming the man is a noble, and Dorothy realizes this is a golden opportunity that came at the perfect time. The noble tells her he has a request and wants to assign her a task. Dorothy prepares to seize this opportunity to the fullest. She realizes that if she succeeds in handling this situation, her reputation will spread among the nobles, and she will gain true fame. She invites him to sit, and although she finds his intrusion into her space in this manner somewhat rude, she convinces herself that dealing with difficult clients is part of the mission she chose. She asks him why he came, and he tells her his wife has been causing trouble lately. Then he reveals his true intention, asking her to adjust his wife's mood a little. His request takes a more evil turn when he asks if she can make his wife completely unable to speak, or at least more submissive and obedient, shocking Dorothy. He adds insolently and confidently, "The saint can do that, can't she?" While Dorothy bites her lip in silence, trying to suppress her anger. The noble loses his patience and demands she hurry with an answer, declaring he doesn't plan on staying in a place like this for long, which rouses her ire, and she orders him to get out. Dorothy coldly refuses his request, declaring she doesn't accept such requests. She thinks to herself that this might be her only chance to meet a noble, but she flatly refuses to build her fame on fulfilling such a vile request. The noble is surprised by her response. Then he orders his companion something. Suddenly, the companion grabs Dorothy's hand violently, and Agatha screams, her name in terror. The noble threatens her, wondering how she dares to disrespect him, and how she thinks her pretending to be a saint gives her the right to respond to him. Agatha intervenes in a state of extreme anger, shouting at him, calling him a rascal, and revealing to Dorothy that he only became a viscount thanks to his wife's family. Agatha adds that instead of being grateful, he was caught cheating, and concludes that the reason he came here is his desire to hide his betrayal from his powerful father-in-law to keep his title. Dorothy smiles a cunning smile after understanding the whole situation. Dorothy confronts him with the truth, telling him he doesn't fear his wife but is terrified of his father-in-law. She asks him mockingly if he really thinks silencing his wife will solve everything, and asserts to him that he turned to her because he doesn't want to lose everything, shocking the noble with her words. He asks her in a state of panic where she heard this talk, and Dorothy answers him coldly, wondering if he thought his wife was the only one who knew of his sins. She calls him naive and foolish, and his confusion and fear increase. Having completely lost his mind, the noble shouts at his guards, ordering them to catch her and silence her immediately. One of the guards steps forward and grabs her arm. She warns him to leave her immediately or else. Before she can finish her sentence, an invisible force violently pushes the guards back, and they scream in pain. The noble screams in intense pain as an invisible force wraps around his hands, and Dorothy looks on in amazement, realizing that someone just pushed him away. Dorothy is surprised as she looks at Agatha. She thought the goddess could only talk to her and wonders in amazement if she possesses physical strength too. The Viscount, bound by magical shackles, screams in a state of shock and asks Dorothy if she was the one who did that, trying to free himself to no avail. Dorothy decides to postpone questioning him for later. What matters to her now is knowing how this noble heard about her. She advances toward him with steady steps and threatens him coldly, wondering if he wants his arm broken. The Viscount trembles in fear, muttering broken words about his arm, then asks her in terror about her true identity. Dorothy sits before him calmly and sighs mockingly, saying there's no need for questions since she already knows everything. then tells him she will ask him only one question. With a glacial smile, she tells him he doesn't have the choice of refusal, while Agatha appears behind her in an angry form. The Viscount tries to evade, claiming it's a bit difficult, but the magical shackles tighten around his wrists, causing him pain. Under the weight of pain, the noble screams, declaring he will tell her everything, and Dorothy wonders what everything he will confess. The Viscount and his guards kneel on the ground, and he begins to confess the existence of an illegal gambling den in the city, managed by a wealthy and famous business figure. He explains that this place is actually a house of pleasure where anyone can enter and gamble regardless of their social status, and that the goal is to find skilled gamblers. He adds that since there are no restrictions on status, homeless people frequent the place constantly, and that's where he first heard about the saint. Dorothy asks curiously if other nobles visit this place often, and the Viscount confirms the existence of a separate inner room dedicated to them. Dorothy's eyes shine, realizing that the existence of a place where nobles gather secretly represents a golden opportunity that cannot be missed. Agatha becomes extremely angry and calls the owners of the place rascals because they run a gambling den to lure innocent people. Dorothy surprises the little goddess by announcing she will visit that gambling den, causing Agatha to scream in a state of shock. Dorothy explains she doesn't intend to gamble herself, but believes it's a good opportunity to meet those nobles there, leaving the Viscount and his guards in confusion. The men wonder why she is talking to herself suddenly, while Dorothy turns to whisper to Agatha, reminding her she doesn't care about money, and that this place is perfect for spreading rumors about her more widely. Agatha hesitates, disapproving of the idea of a guardian goddess going to a gambling den, but Dorothy insists, so the goddess agrees reluctantly, just for this time. Having succeeded in convincing Agatha, Dorothy turns to the Viscount with a triumphant smile and orders him to show her the location of the den. In front of a grand building, they reach the illegal gambling den, and Dorothy confirms that this is the intended place. Inside, the place is buzzing with nobles and people from various classes, immersed in different gambling games amidst a noisy atmosphere. Dorothy shows her surprise. The place is larger and more crowded than she imagined. Agatha comments that the place is very chaotic, where all kinds of feelings of guilt, anger, despair, ecstasy, and obsession intertwine. But Dorothy realizes the emotional chaos in the place is so strong she can see it herself without needing Agatha's help. The Viscount approaches Dorothy in fear, asking if God is still angry with him and if he will survive, confirming he did everything she asked. Dorothy tells him to grovel to his wife and spend his life atoning for his sins, to live as her servant, and only then will he be okay. Before she lets him go, she asks him to guide her to the inner room, and he agrees immediately while trembling with fear. The Viscount leads them to a massive door under heavy guard that smells of expensive perfumes. Dorothy tells him she will enter first. Inside, two masked ladies are surprised by her entry and wonder if she is their opponent for today, noting she was chosen quickly. Two other nobles whisper, with one wondering if the new player is highly skilled, but the other clarifies that no one has been chosen yet, and she is likely someone the Viscount brought with him. One of the ladies objects that this violates the rules, while a woman observing the scene from a high place smiles, thinking to herself she doesn't mind breaking the rules as long as it will be entertaining. Dorothy finds herself at a gambling table, facing three opponents who seem to be seasoned players. One of the ladies asks her in a confident tone if she is good with playing cards. Dorothy realizes she is in a critical position. If she doesn't participate in the game and simply tries to promote herself as a saint in her shabby clothes, she will earn nothing but mockery and expulsion. With eyes shining with determination, Dorothy makes her decision, concluding she has no choice but to participate in the game. She turns to Agatha to tell her of her decision. The little goddess expresses surprise that Dorothy would resort to gambling, but Dorothy explains to her that although she knows she is displeased, this is the only way to set the stage and grab the necessary attention for her plan. Dorothy admits to herself she has never gambled in her life, but gathers her courage, believing luck favors the bold. Agatha reluctantly agrees, justifying it as they were the ones who asked for help, so following Dorothy's plan is right. At that moment, Dorothy faces a fundamental problem. She doesn't know the rules of the game. Dorothy asks the little goddess if any of the other guardian gods are familiar with gambling rules. Another goddess appears, confidently, and declares she knows the rules perfectly, promising Dorothy they will show her their skills, affirming she will have full divine support. With the gods' help, Dorothy enters the game with full confidence, announcing bets and increasing them, entering forcefully into every round. One of the opponents screams in anger after suffering another defeat at her hands, while a cunning smile plays on Dorothy's face, expressing her victory. Whispers rise among the other players as they wonder in confusion about the identity of this mysterious young lady they haven't seen before, and how she appeared suddenly with such superior skill. A noble challenges Dorothy to another round after losing to her 3 consecutive times, warning her she will ruin herself if she continues in this manner. With a calm smile, Dorothy thinks that the credit goes to Agatha for her streak of consecutive victories, realizing she has started to attract attention and the time has come to move to the next stage of her plan. Dorothy addresses the attendees, asking in a confident tone if they have grown bored of playing traditional games, and suggests they try something different and exciting. Her words pique their curiosity. She explains she is suggesting another type of gambling, announcing the entry fee to participate in this new game is 1 million. A noble asks her eagerly about the nature of this new gamble she is talking about. With a confident gesture and support from Agatha, who appears behind her, Dorothy announces the game's name is the Saint's Game. Dorothy explains the rules simply. She will play the role of the saint who reads the opponent's hidden thoughts or reveals their circumstances and worries they haven't disclosed. If she succeeds in guessing them correctly, she wins the bet. As she expected, the nobles addicted to gambling and seeking greater excitement participated in the Saint's Game, she suggested, only for all of them to receive a crushing defeat. The game wasn't just entertainment. Dorothy's readings were so accurate and detailed, they struck even those who tried to deny them with astonishment and paleness. The goal of the Saint's Game began to change in the participants' eyes, taking a more serious turn. Eventually, rumors began to spread exactly as she had planned, with people beginning to talk about the homeless girl who appeared in the Saint's Game. Rumors quickly ignited, and people began to wonder if this girl was a real saint indeed. The rumors crossed the boundaries of the small town and spread throughout the region, announcing the appearance of a true saint. After a few days, Dorothy was checking a house with a real estate agent and told him this house was the most suitable for her. The agent agreed, considering it an excellent choice. The agent pointed to the spacious area of the house, affirming it was perfect for her needs. When the agent mentioned the house was expensive and asked how to pay the deposit, Dorothy opened her bag confidently and told him she could pay immediately. Thanks to the Saint's Game, which she didn't intend to collect money from, Dorothy obtained a large fortune that enabled her to buy her own house. Dorothy handed a bag full of gold coins to the stunned agent, thinking that it's annoying to carry all this cash, and the first thing she will do upon reaching the capital is open a bank account. Dorothy stands inside the new building she bought, revealing the real reason for leaving the homeless shelter: her desire to create a suitable shrine for the gods. Dorothy finds herself surrounded by a huge crowd of people who flock to her new place, thinking that the flocking of people is proof of the rumors spreading, but her small room in the homeless shelter wouldn't have accommodated this large gathering. Dorothy realizes she could have continued collecting clients in the gambling den, but believes it's better to attract them as a true saint and in a proper place, giving her work a more formal and credible character. Dorothy sighs, thinking of the irony of fate. After doing her best in her previous life to avoid becoming a shaman, here she is now forced to create her own shrine in this new world. Although this is her first time working officially as a shaman, thanks to her upbringing with her shaman mother, she knows exactly what she must do. With a look full of confidence, she declares to herself she is capable of winning the hearts and minds of the people of this world. Agatha expresses her happiness because Dorothy found a proper house, but asks her curiously about the meaning of the word shrine, as she hasn't heard it before. Dorothy smiles and tells her she will show her that right away. Dorothy enthusiastically announces that their first step is to go shopping and buy the necessary groceries. Shortly after, Dorothy has finished preparing an elaborate altar, decorated with tools she made herself and fresh ingredients she bought personally. Agatha looks at the altar in confusion and asks Dorothy what all these things are. Dorothy explains to her that this is part of the show, and that in order to make people believe, a certain level of theatrical performance must be presented. She continues, explaining that a shaman must be a brilliant actor, as creating a dramatic atmosphere before people makes them drawn in and focused on what's happening. She remembers how the general atmosphere is what determines a shaman's success or failure, citing a scene from her past where a shaman frightened one of his clients by telling him his ancestors' spirits were angry because of a major sin he committed. Agatha asks if the fruit on the table is part of this show too. Dorothy answers that this is an altar to serve the gods and tells Agatha she can eat whatever she wants, as this is ultimately an offering presented to the gods. Agatha is shocked and tells her she hasn't received anything like this before. People usually only present offerings in important matters or to fulfill deep desires, and even in those cases, they sacrifice a large animal. This is the first time she has seen such an offering. Agatha takes a berry, and her facial expression changes to overwhelming happiness as she describes its delicious taste to Dorothy, expressing that it's been a long time since she felt she was having a real meal. With a sincere smile, Agatha thanks Dorothy with all her heart. Dorothy feels proud to see Agatha happy and thinks that next time she should bring her something different. While she is lost in her thoughts, she hears a new voice saying, "He wants some food too," and she turns around in a state of shock. A small god with white hair appears before her, flying in the air and looking at the fruit longingly, commenting that it looks very delicious. Dorothy asks the new god about his identity, while Agatha scolded him because he started eating before even offering a greeting. Suddenly, more small gods appear. Dorothy asks them in amazement when they all descended here. They answer her in one voice that she was the one who asked them to descend, and her confusion increases as she doesn't remember asking them to do so. They clarify to her that this matter concerns her, as she is the only human capable of saving them, and her presence is a great blessing for them, revealing they were controlling themselves with difficulty based on Agatha's request. Dorothy asks Agatha hesitantly if these are... Agatha confirms with overwhelming joy that they are the rest of the guardian gods. The new gods begin introducing themselves. The god with white hair is Horti, the god of children, and the goddess with pink hair is Vesta, the goddess of the hearth. Then the god with dark hair steps forward, introducing himself as Mark, the god of war and knight commander, and apologizes to Dorothy for breaking her bed last time, clarifying he couldn't control his strength and promises he will be more careful in the future. Dorothy tries to maintain her composure and answers with a nervous smile that it's okay, then asks them if they will all stay by her side every day. The gods rejoice at her question and answer enthusiastically that they will all stay by her side. In that moment, Dorothy realizes the magnitude of the predicament she put herself in and remembers there are 8 gods in the Empire. She panics, for if Agatha alone represented a burden, how would she deal with all of them? Agatha intervenes after noticing the state of panic that struck Dorothy, asking the other gods to slow down, noting they are making things difficult for her. The gods agree not to all descend except when necessary, to organize themselves into groups that take turns visiting her, and not to surprise her by talking suddenly. Dorothy contemplates the chaos caused by the arrival of the gods, thinking it is far too noisy even though they haven't all descended yet, and she feels relieved that Agatha is taking charge of organizing and guiding them. But she soon looks at the matter from a different angle, realizing that she now has the support of 8 gods. So why should she fear a single emperor? With a newfound confidence filling her, Dorothy officially announces the opening of the Saint's Shrine, ready to face Emperor Theodore. Meanwhile, at the Imperial Palace, news arrives of the appearance of a gambling saint operating under the guise of the Saint's Game. An official discusses the matter with Emperor Theodore, who finds the news extremely interesting. The Emperor reads the report in his hands, stating that Saint Dorothy has moved beyond the slums, and her fame is beginning to sweep the empire. The Emperor expresses his deep dissatisfaction, as it is inconceivable that he, the master of this empire, would be the last to know about a saint sweeping his kingdom, describing his informants as more useless than a mere journalist, prompting one of his assistants to apologize immediately. In any case, the Emperor concludes that the temple must be desperate enough to resort to claiming the appearance of a saint who only existed in ancient myths. He then asks about the High Priest's movements, receiving the response that he has made no move yet. The Emperor finds this situation completely unexpected, as no one seems to know anything about the matter. After a moment of reflection, the Emperor makes his decision, realizing only one path remains to handle: the situation. He issues a strict order to his assistants, commanding them to investigate quietly and as quickly as possible the nature of the relationship between this woman claiming to be a saint and the temple, then adds in an indisputable tone that they are to bring this saint before him. At Dorothy's shrine, people gather in large numbers and women exchange conversations, with one asking another if she also came to see the saint, and the other replying that her younger brother was here not long ago. A young man sits before Dorothy, appearing anxious because she remained silent for some time, asking her if she felt something. Dorothy breaks her silence, but she does not address the young man. Instead, she asks about his aching legs and if they have improved, then suddenly asks about his grandson, James, causing him great astonishment. In shock and with tearful eyes, the young man realizes that the person speaking through Dorothy is his deceased grandmother, asking if she truly is his grandmother. In a touching scene, the young man hugs Dorothy while crying, wondering why her soul hasn't rested in peace yet. to which his grandmother's spirit replies that she couldn't leave because she was so worried about him. Dorothy thinks to herself that she is beginning to get used to the acting, and in his grandmother's voice, she warns the young man, named Jace, that the girl he is trying to marry is a bad person. The events clarify that thanks to Agatha's power, Dorothy is no longer just able to reveal information about people, but she has become able to see ghosts associated with her clients. And since she enjoys the protection of the gods, she is not possessed, but rather mimics their way of speaking. While she is in the middle of the session, a girl rushes inside shouting, "Saint!" and Dorothy explains that rumors about her are spreading quickly thanks to these events. Dorothy asks her what the matter is, and the girl tells her that someone from the capital, from the Imperial Palace, has arrived. The girl confirms they came to take the saint, and here Dorothy realizes the matter has reached the Emperor himself and that he is personally looking for her. Despite the gravity of the situation, Dorothy remains calm, thinking that what had to happen has already occurred. Dorothy ends her session with the young man and apologizes to him, emphasizing the need to take his grandmother's words seriously, and he promises to do so. Dorothy asks the girl how many people came from the palace, and she replies there are 3, and they asked for the saint to be brought to them, concluding that His Majesty the Emperor wants to meet her as well. The girl looks worried, pointing to the back door and explaining that the palace men are waiting at the front entrance. Dorothy stops her and asks for a favor, and the girl immediately agrees. Dorothy asks her to tell them 10 minutes after she leaves that they waited outside out of respect for the saint's prayers, but they felt strange and entered only to discover she wasn't there and that she had simply disappeared suddenly. Dorothy explains the reason for her sudden disappearance plan after all the effort she put into becoming famous. To clarify the matter, she recalls a shocking truth she discovered when Agatha revealed she was unable to read the Emperor's thoughts, leaving Dorothy in total shock. She asks Agatha in confusion about the reason, since Dorothy can read everyone's thoughts. Agatha explains the bitter truth. The Emperor possesses a special protection inherited from the first Emperor. Agatha continues her explanation, showing that this protection is a collection of the prayers and desires of his ancestors to protect their descendants, and this protection has become such a formidable force that even the guardian gods cannot touch it. Consequently, all emperors are born with innate good luck. Dorothy grasps the scale of the problem and panics, realizing the emperor is a total cheat character with abilities beyond the ordinary. Dorothy collapses to the ground feeling despair, as all of this seems illogical. The emperor is scary enough on his own, but the idea that her cheat codes, her divine powers, won't work against him increases her frustration. Dorothy recalls her original plan. Since the rumors about her had spread as intended, it was impossible for the emperor, who monitors the temple closely, to remain idle. Her only plan was to use her fame as a shield before public opinion and use her divine powers to convince him. But now she faces the fact that these divine powers will not work on him, causing her entire plan to collapse. With an apologetic look, Agatha apologizes, explaining she doesn't think there is anything else she can do to help her in this matter. Despair takes over Dorothy, realizing that if she meets the Emperor, she will be treated as a fraud and her fate will be death. She is doomed. But Agatha soon gathers herself and shouts that this isn't true, assuring Dorothy that she possesses a wisdom they as gods do not have, and that she is smart and brilliant. Agatha declares her absolute faith in Dorothy. The rest of the gods join her, encouraging her enthusiastically and assuring her she can do it. However, Dorothy feels extreme pressure from this atmosphere, thinking to herself that any wrong move could cost her her head on charges of insulting the Emperor. Dorothy starts thinking deeply, wondering if there really is a way to achieve the gods' goals and save her life at the same time. After a moment of thought, her eyes sparkle, realizing there is indeed a solution. This is the reason that prompted her to deliberately avoid the Emperor's men and come to this place. Dorothy reaches her destination, a grand and imposing building, the temple. She realizes the temple is the only entity in this world capable of restraining the Emperor. Dorothy remembers that the Manpelin Empire was a religious state, and therefore the temple enjoyed great status in the past. However, it had become a center of corruption for a long time, as its priests exploited people's faith and devotion to fill their own pockets, eventually leading to the weakening of the gods' power. Sarcastically, Dorothy realizes that this corrupt group she is supposed to reform now provides her with the perfect conditions to be her protective shield. Dorothy pushes open the temple doors forcefully, thinking that after the failure of her plan to use divine power on the Emperor, this has become the only place that can protect her. With full confidence, she declares she wishes to see the bishop of this temple. 2 temple knights block her path, and one asks her name. She identifies herself as the Saint Dorothy. The guard smiles mockingly, wondering if she is that famous fraud he heard about. The guard orders her to leave, explaining that frauds are prohibited from entering. Dorothy expected this response, realizing that the reason the temple hadn't looked for her despite the rumors was clear. A saint who appeared in a gambling den wouldn't be good for the temple's image. With a cunning smile, Dorothy decides that in this case, she has no choice but to show them her power. She addresses the guard by his name, Arthur, and tells him that calling her a fraud is great blasphemy. Dorothy begins her first round, confronting Arthur directly, asking if he is the one deceiving his wife. She reveals she knows he was gambling and losing money at Everdun's bar recently, and that the money he lost was a bonus he had received. She adds, wondering how much pain his wife would feel if she found out. Arthur's companion is shocked and asks if this is true, while Arthur, realizing the situation is not in their favor, suggests they call their superiors. In the second round, a more senior knight named Mr. Anton appears. Dorothy addresses him directly, telling him unfortunately that Miss Emily, whom he adores, actually hates him, so he should give up. She adds that he should also apologize for mocking her freckles 2 years ago. As for the third round, she faces a priest named Thomas. She tells him that no one cares about the mole on his backside, so there is no need to poke it with the tip of a pen. The priest is stunned, wondering how she knew this secret. The priest feels terror and extreme embarrassment from the disclosure of his intimate secret. Shortly after, with a face red from shame, one of the high priests tells her that the bishop is upstairs. Dorothy moves with the exhausted priest, thinking she has finally passed the last hurdle. She adds to herself that it would have been better for them if they had let her pass from the start, before she was forced to expose their dirty secrets. The priest enters the office of the bishop of the Dumong region and tells him he has a visitor. The bishop responds sharply that he is busy now, scolding the priest, saying he should have disposed of such a fraud himself. The priest insists there is definitely something strange about this woman, but the bishop rebukes him angrily, wondering with disdain if he really has to deal with such trivial matters. Dorothy realizes from his attitude that he is trying to subdue and psychologically control her from the start, so she decides she won't allow him that. She advances confidently and greets him, to which the bishop responds coldly, announcing he heard she wanted to see him, and asking in a condescending tone what she wants. Before she can answer, the bishop interrupts, her sternly assuring her that their temple does not allow the entry of frauds like her. 3. But Dorothy surprises him completely, telling him it has been more than 20 years since he was transferred to this city, yet he still has a lot of nostalgia for the capital, causing the bishop shock and amazement. With a confident smile, Dorothy continues her pressure, telling him if he wants to return to the capital, he must listen to her carefully. She reveals that men sent by the Imperial family were looking for her and that she escaped here because she trusts the temple more than the Imperial family, causing the bishop's eyes to widen in disbelief. She continues with a cunning smile, wondering if the high priests at the great temple in the capital wouldn't find this interesting. Then she thinks of these corrupt humans, asking them to support her and repent for their sins. A few days later at the Imperial Palace, Emperor Theodore is informed that the saint has gone to the temple, and he appears surprised and deep in thought. His assistant apologizes and confirms the news, adding that the carriage carrying the bishop and the saint headed directly to the capital, and they tried to track them, but they had already left. The emperor asks his advisors why she left at the same moment the Imperial Palace men arrived. Then he sharply asks his assistant, Isaac, if his power struggle with the temple is known even among the common people. Isaac explains that the nobles and employees in the temple certainly know about it, but it isn't something known among the common people, because talking about it might affect public opinion. The emperor reviews the events in his mind. The temple had treated the saint as a fraud and hadn't contacted her for the past 2 months, and she, in turn, hadn't made any move toward the temple. He wonders why she chose to move now specifically. If she had intended to rely on the temple from the beginning, it would have been logical to go to them as soon as her powers appeared, but she remained silent for 2 months, then fled to the temple the moment he moved. The emperor concludes the shocking truth. This girl knows exactly the nature of the tug-of-war and the power struggle between the temple and the imperial family. While he is lost in thought, a knight bursts into the room announcing urgent news regarding the great temple. The knight reveals the temple plans to officially recognize the second coming of the saint. He adds that everything will be announced soon, and they plan to hold an appearance ceremony to introduce the saint to the public. A mysterious smile forms on the emperor's face as he thinks they are moving with remarkable efficiency. He concludes that what is happening looks as if someone sees through the laws of this world and is executing a precise plan. Meanwhile, Dorothy sits in a luxurious carriage heading toward the capital. She looks out the window with overwhelming happiness, thinking this is how it feels to be inside a romance novel, as the capital looks completely different from anything she has seen before. The bishop asks her hesitantly if she will truly help him return to the capital, and she answers in the affirmative, of course. They reach their destination, and Dorothy thinks to herself that she is sorry. But as soon as she meets the high priest, her relationship with this bishop will end. They stand before an imposing building resembling a palace, and Dorothy wonders in amazement if this truly is the temple. She wanders inside in a state of awe, shouting internally that everything is plated in gold. Agatha comments sadly that she feels sorrow whenever she sees the great temple now. She remembers that in the distant past, this place was a space for pure faith and belief, not corruption, and reveals she tried to deliver a revelation to prevent the temple's corruption, but people's faith had already diminished to the point she no longer had enough power for it. Agatha completes her talk sadly, explaining that because of this corruption, the guardian gods, including her, could only stand by for a long time watching what was happening, but she smiles with overwhelming happiness, expressing her gratitude for meeting Dorothy. For now, there is hope to reform everything. It turns out Dorothy was wondering initially why Agatha asked for help from her specifically, being a stranger and not even a priestess. Then the bishop bursts into the high priestess's room, announcing he has an urgent matter. The high priestess appears, a woman of prestige, looking at the bishop with disdain and reminding him that 20 years have passed since she ordered him not to show her his face again, asking mockingly if he thought her words were just a joke. The bishop answers in confusion, standing beside Dorothy, that it isn't like that, and he only came to tell her of the second coming of the saint. The high priestess repeats the word saint with sarcasm, adding that she is the one who graced the front page of the newspapers. She thinks to herself sarcastically, describing her as a fraud. Dorothy steps forward and greets the high priestess, who mocks her saying, a country girl who doesn't even know how to greet people is wandering around claiming to be the saint, and that the gods must be displeased. Dorothy responds calmly and confidently that it's natural for her to think that way, and that she will make her believe she is the saint in exchange for uniting with her. The high priestess laughs sarcastically, while Dorothy thinks to herself that she can feel how corrupt this priestess is, even without Agatha telling her. The high priestess asks her defiantly how she plans to make her believe her. Dorothy surprises her by saying she knows what she wants: to restrain the emperor. The high priestess's face turns to shock and anger, and she orders the bishop to leave immediately. The bishop is stunned but forced to comply with her order. The high priestess orders that no one enter and to ensure no one hears what happens in the room, to which the bishop reluctantly agrees. Once they are alone, the high priestess invites Dorothy to continue their talk comfortably. Dorothy begins to reveal her abilities, telling her she can know anything she wants to know. For example, the location of the secret safe she treasures so much. The high priestess rejects her talk, describing it as slander and claiming a place like this couldn't possibly have such a safe. But Dorothy continues, revealing she has set up a separate house in Mikkel. She adds that this is a house pretending to be a small tavern, but in its basement there is a huge secret safe, asking her disapprovingly what she plans to do with all that. Then Dorothy reveals the pseudonym she created for the secret safe, which is Judith, describing it as a nice name, causing the high priestess to freeze in place, wondering in terror how she knew all this. Dorothy declares she can hear the voices of the 8 guardian gods and even talk to them, then asks her defiantly if she still believes she isn't the saint. The high priestess is stunned, thinking this is impossible even for a priest who receives revelations. Dorothy realizes the high priestess is beginning to believe her now. Dorothy sees this as her opportunity, telling her she has shown her her ability and asking for help. The high priestess asks her why she is asking for help, and Dorothy explains that before she came here, the emperor sent someone to look for her. She adds that the gods told her at the time that the emperor should not catch her, which is why she came to the temple. Dorothy continues her plan, explaining she must appear as a woman possessing nothing but greed and a low commoner who poses no threat to the high priestess, and that she will be an aid to the temple with her ability. She begs her to accept her as someone who seems useful to exploit. The high priestess thinks about the situation, wondering why the emperor is looking for the saint when he doesn't believe in her existence to begin with. A cunning smile forms on her face, concluding that in any case, if she uses her well, she can restrain the emperor. With a forced smile, the high priestess agrees, addressing Dorothy, saying that as long as the gods speak to her, they must be like a family bound by blessings. Then she asks her, since she has just come from Dumont, if she has a place to stay. Dorothy is surprised by this sudden change in her attitude. Dorothy answers in the negative, so the high priestess expresses her pleasure and offers her stay at the Great Temple, assuring her she will guarantee her a comfortable stay. Dorothy thanks her for her hospitality, while the high priestess tells her she is sure Dorothy understands the real meaning behind her actions. She continues her talk confidently, believing Dorothy will provide her great aid during her stay at the temple. Dorothy feels some concern, wondering to herself if she has done the right thing. Agatha explains to her that the high priestess doesn't fully believe she is the saint, and that she is also thinking about the possibility that her secret information has been leaked. Dorothy wonders why the High Priestess decided to keep her by her side, and Agatha replies she thinks she might be useful, and it would be better if she actually were the real saint. For now, she intends to keep her close to ensure her secrets don't leak. The High Priestess ends their talk and asks Dorothy to go rest, telling her she will assign her a servant to meet her needs. Dorothy stops her and tells her she must wait a moment. Dorothy asks her directly when she plans to announce the second coming of the saint. The High Priestess tells her it is still too early to interfere in the temple's affairs, and she intends to announce the matter within a week, but Dorothy insists that a week is too long. She surprises her by demanding the announcement be tomorrow, sparking the High Priestess's shock. Dorothy continues insistently, emphasizing the need for the announcement to appear in the morning papers and that official celebrations can wait for later. Dorothy thinks to herself that Emperor Theodore's men have already come to arrest her, and she would be dead by the end of the week. The High Priestess becomes angry, thinking if Dorothy turns out to be a fraud, it will be the end of the temple too, wondering how she can ask her to take such a massive gamble now. The High Priestess screams in her face, wondering how she dares to speak to her, the High Priestess, in this way. Dorothy is surprised by the sudden change in her attitude again, and Agatha asks her to step back. Suddenly, a bright blue light engulfs the High Priestess, and she freezes in place from shock. Agatha appears in a state of extreme anger, rebuking the High Priestess for having little faith and much greed, even though she calls herself the High Priestess. Agatha's power lifts the High Priestess into the air. The latter screams in a state of disbelief, wondering if she is actually using divine power and demanding she be lowered immediately. With an innocent smile, Dorothy asks the High Priestess hanging in the air, "What do you think about announcing it tomorrow?" Shortly after, the High Priestess bids Dorothy farewell and asks her to rest well. Dorothy thanks her, and then leaves the room breathing a sigh of relief. Dorothy turns to Agatha and tells her what she did was amazing. Agatha laughs and asks if she was surprised. Dorothy replies she wasn't just surprised, but thought her heart would stop. Agatha apologizes, explaining her power is still weak and there wasn't much she could do, but she is happy it helped convince the High Priestess. Dorothy thanks her warmly. Dorothy thinks that thanks to Agatha, she doesn't believe the High Priestess will be able to mess with her for a while. Agatha explains her power is starting to return slowly, perhaps because of Dorothy, and if the other gods regain their power like her, they will soon be able to show their divine authorities, although it will take longer to fully regain their power. Despite everything, Agatha feels that since she met Dorothy, everything will be fine. Suddenly, Agatha stops, feeling something is wrong, and tells Dorothy her connection to her is starting to weaken. Agatha explains the reason for the weakened connection is likely the approach of a presence that cannot be read from this place. Dorothy realizes with concern that if this is a presence even Agatha cannot read, it must be an extremely dangerous person. Suddenly, a priest rushes into the room in a state of panic, calling, "Saint." The priest tells the shocked Dorothy that His Majesty the Emperor has arrived, and the High Priestess has ordered him to hide her immediately. While the priest leads her quickly, Dorothy thinks she didn't expect the Emperor to move this fast, and that his intelligence network is stronger than she imagined. Dorothy decides the best place to hide is where there are many people, so she asks the priest to take her to the nearby church. On her way, she thinks if she hides alone in a quiet place, it would be like announcing her location, so it's better to hide among the crowds. After sitting among the worshippers and wearing her head covering, she asks Agatha, who can still see Theodore even if she can't reach him, to tell her the moment he appears in the church. Dorothy tries calling Agatha again but receives no response, realizing with shock that the connection has suddenly cut off. She wonders in terror if this means she has to avoid Theodore entirely on her own. At that moment, Emperor Theodore enters the church. Dorothy is surprised by his speed and sharp intuition, deciding that for now she must act as if she is just an ordinary believer having a normal conversation with others. She turns to the man sitting beside her and greets him. The man welcomes her, wishing her blessing and peace. Dorothy continues her acting, returning the greeting and asking how he is. The man replies, he is fine. While the Emperor wanders the church, he hears people's whispers around him. One wonders when God will respond to them, another complains his arthritis is worsening, and a third talks about how they are expected to present more offerings. The Emperor passes by Dorothy, who is talking to the other man about the difficult times lately. Suddenly, the Emperor stops directly in front of her, addressing her saying, "You," then orders her to raise her head. Dorothy raises her head in shock. The Emperor asks her name. After a moment of mutual staring, he repeats his order to answer him. Dorothy answers him in confusion, claiming her name is Maria. Thinking to herself she was staring at him in awe without realizing it. The Emperor asks why she hasn't removed her head covering. She replies she is currently performing penance. The Emperor smiles sarcastically, telling her it's okay to keep it if her penance is more important than her life. She immediately declares she will remove it, while Dorothy removes her head covering. She thinks to herself that although this isn't the time for such thoughts, he is insanely handsome. The Emperor looks at her closely and asks her directly if she is the saint. The Emperor continues his talk, describing the fraudulent saint from the commercial center who took over gambling dens, then points to her and asks if she is that woman. Dorothy tries to deny in confusion, wondering what he is talking about. The Emperor smiles confidently, confirming he guesses it's her. Dorothy thinks to herself that Agatha's absence has a big effect, and she hadn't acted this confidently before except because the gods were helping her. Dorothy realizes he is certainly testing her and decides for now to continue pretending ignorance. She thinks that currently she has no means or power to declare she will help him. She isn't a winning card for the Emperor yet, just a temporary nuisance. If she wants to stay alive, this is the only way. In a desperate attempt to change the subject, Dorothy pretends to be extremely shy, asking him if what he just said means he thinks she is holy and beautiful. She continues her acting enthusiastically, expressing her overwhelming happiness that she can't believe such a handsome person would give her such a compliment. The Emperor is completely surprised by her unexpected reaction, and amazement appears on his face. Dorothy continues performing her role, pretending to be shy, saying she will feel embarrassed if he keeps staring at her like that. Coldly, the Emperor asks Dorothy if she has lost her mind. Dorothy thinks to herself that his words are harsh and feels extreme embarrassment, but convinces herself this is better than real death. Then she recalls an important piece of information from the original novel. Emperor Theodore never took an empress even after ascending the throne. She recalls the reason for that. He was subjected to countless harassments from women seeking power, and because of the difficulty of distinguishing between noble families not allied with the temple, he grew to loathe women who approached him boldly. Dorothy continues her acting, pretending to be a slightly crazy girl, but admiring his handsomeness to the point she spoke her feelings out loud. Inside, she admits her fear, but realizes this is the only way to divert his attention from searching for the saint. And the Emperor's assistant, Isaac, bursts onto the scene, asking her angrily who sent her, suggesting names of nobles like Viscount Homery or Baron Akafir. Isaac thinks he has already checked all the women from those families and avoided them, then suspects Count Choisky, calling him a rat. In contrast, Dorothy wonders in confusion at the strangeness of all these names, which sound like a rat, a leech, and a cockroach. Dorothy feels relieved they misunderstood the situation and continues her acting, claiming she knows nothing of these matters and was simply on a pilgrimage. Then she stands suddenly and declares loudly that if the Emperor desires her, she is ready to give up her vows. She adds with false enthusiasm that she believes God will understand their love, approaching him boldly. She thinks to herself, wishing she appears completely obsessed and deranged in his eyes, while the Emperor remains silent watching her. Isaac clears his throat and tells the Emperor they must return to the palace, describing Dorothy as a bizarre, crazy woman. Dorothy rejoices secretly at the success of her acting, hoping she can continue in this manner. But suddenly, the Emperor approaches her, and she freezes in place from shock while he asks her what kind of trick she is using. Dorothy pretends innocence, asking him the meaning of trick, claiming she was just happy. The Emperor threatens her that if what she is doing is mere acting and he discovers she lied to him, her life won't be enough. He adds coldly that her life won't be enough to pay the price. Dorothy is terrified, realizing she shouldn't underestimate him and she might truly die this way. In a moment of despair, she decides to change her plan, bowing before him and apologizing profusely. She claims she is just a foolish commoner, and when a noble person like the Emperor showed her some kindness, she became greedy. She exploits the fact that despite his opposition to the temple and the saint, he is still known among the people as a virtuous ruler. She continues her apology, claiming she must appear as a pathetic and foolish commoner. She adds, hiding her face, that it's embarrassing to say this, but she was told often she is beautiful, and because she was poor, she dreamed foolish dreams. After a moment of silence, the Emperor orders her to rise. She asks him hesitantly if he forgives her. The Emperor extends his hand to her. She hesitates for a moment, then thanks him warmly. While he holds her hand, Dorothy thinks that perhaps because his killing aura vanished, he looks like a completely different person now. The Emperor turns and asks Isaac for them to go, thinking he must have become overly sensitive because of that fake saint. While on their way, the Emperor asks about the High Priestess's location. Isaac replies they should head to the first floor. Dorothy breathes a sigh of relief, thinking she isn't sure what happened, but since he just left, she guesses she succeeded in passing the situation somehow. But she realizes it's only a matter of time before he knows her true face. She concludes there is no escape from it now, and she will have to gain widespread fame to protect herself. Until then, she decides she has no choice but to continue avoiding him. Suddenly, Agatha appears in a flash of light, calling, "Dorothy!" anxiously, and asking if she is okay and unhurt. Dorothy calls her, telling her she disappeared suddenly and she was very scared. Agatha apologizes, explaining she believes the Emperor's divine protection blocked her voice and form. Dorothy absorbs the shocking truth. When the Emperor is near, she cannot speak to the gods. She realizes the situation is much worse than she thought. Despite the gravity of the situation, Agatha expresses extreme admiration for what Dorothy did, asking how she was so quick-witted, quoting her words, "Maria is beautiful?" Dorothy asks her in embarrassment if she saw everything. Agatha confirms of course she did, and the other gods were shocked too. The small gods continue to praise Dorothy, hailing her genius and extreme quick-wittedness in handling the situation. Dorothy reflects internally, realizing that in such situations, one must put pride aside and prioritize survival, recalling how the gods that tortured her and the prejudice she faced as a shaman's daughter made her live a lonely and desolate life. The gods continue expressing their admiration, confirming she endured the situation bravely and what she did wasn't something just anyone could do. And one even enthusiastically suggests they go turn the Imperial Palace upside down for her. A warm smile forms on Dorothy's face, as she realizes this warmth and praise she receives from the beings she long avoided now gives her a deep sense of reassurance and comfort. One of the goddesses notices Dorothy is crying, and Dorothy realizes at that moment she has begun to accept them as her true allies. Elsewhere, Emperor Theodore faces the High Priestess, telling her he has learned she threatened the worshippers in the church. The High Priestess denies this claim, asserting she only greeted them kindly, considering what he says a great exaggeration while wondering about his true intentions and what he is planning this time. The Emperor responds sarcastically, saying he believes she, of all people, should be most familiar with his plans, asking mockingly if God doesn't tell her such matters. The High Priestess answers sharply that God sends great revelations, not trivial chatter. The Emperor continues his mockery, pointing out that the appearance of a new saint capable of knowing people's secrets through her talk with God is strange, especially since the High Priestess herself hears nothing, suggesting God doesn't care much for her. The Emperor announces he will leave now and his visit was just to say hello. Before leaving, he coldly reminds her it's time to look for a successor, taking into account her advanced age. Once he leaves, the High Priestess hits her desk forcefully in a fit of rage, shouting curses. The High Priestess vows to herself against this insolent rascal, recalling how his parents knelt before her 16 years ago begging for mercy, yet their son dares to show all this arrogance. After composing herself, she calls a priest and asks him to answer her. The High Priestess tells the priest that after announcing the saint's return, they need an event to present her to the public. The priest informs her they received a suitable invitation from the Marquise of Arlon. The High Priestess thinks the Emperor coming personally to search for the saint as she expected proves she is a valuable tool to exploit, and considers this an opportunity God gave her. She determines that as the High Priestess, she will exploit this opportunity to reach the highest ranks of power, believing the gods themselves allowed it. She declares in her heart she will exploit the saint fully. The day after the Emperor appeared in the Great Temple and the stir it caused, newspapers spread everywhere. Pursuant to the official announcement from the Great Temple, news of the saint's appearance spreads throughout the country. Headlines lead with the news of the completion of the saint's verification process and her legendary appearance. Dorothy sits with the High Priestess, feeling strange that she has finally become a famous figure nationwide. The High Priestess asks if she is happy with this, noting the Empire's citizens are jubilant at her appearance. Dorothy replies enthusiastically she is very pleased, while thinking sarcastically to herself, wondering if she thinks her a fool. Dorothy realizes a quick look at the news articles reveals the truth. They glorify the High Priestess and describe her as the one who received the saint's blessing, a divine messenger, and a peacemaker. Dorothy concludes the High Priestess wants to take all the credit for herself. The High Priestess explains the reason they were able to announce her identity so quickly is that the gods helped them through the blue flame. Dorothy confirms everyone is talking about this matter, thinking this event was actually thanks to Agatha's power, and ultimately helped establish her image as a true saint in people's minds. Dorothy continues her talk with the High Priestess, claiming she pleaded with the gods to achieve that, and they responded to her wish immediately. The High Priestess looks at her closely and concludes the gods must truly cherish her. Agatha reveals to Dorothy what is going on in the High Priestess's mind. She wonders in disdain why the gods care about this trivial and stupid girl. Agatha asks Dorothy if she really should tell her everything, considering it very insulting, but Dorothy insists on knowing the fine details to respond appropriately. The High Priestess continues her talk, noting that Dorothy seems to already have followers cheering her name, and there are those offering prayers of thanks to the Great Temple. Then she tells her they seem ready now for the appearance ceremony, asking her if they should go out to meet the people. Dorothy enthusiastically agrees, while thinking to herself she will go along with what the High Priestess wants for now. and showing her face to the public will be useful for her. She breathes a sigh of relief, realizing this will be her first official appearance as the saint, and despite her nervousness, she feels confident in her ability to do so. The High Priestess leads Dorothy toward the balcony. Dorothy looks down and sees a massive crowd of people cheering her name, feeling awe at the scene. People's shouts rise as they recognize the saint and the High Priestess, and all eyes turn to them. An elderly woman cries while hugging a young girl, believing the gods truly intend to help them. Everyone cheers. Eternal glory to the saint, and Dorothy feels being the center of attention is beyond all her imagination. She realizes from now on she will have to stand in places like this. Suddenly, a woman steps forward from the crowd carrying a child, pleading with the saint to help her. Explaining her child is sick and she spent all her savings to prepare this donation. Dorothy looks at her, wondering sadly if this woman resorted to such extreme measures because the temple does nothing for free. She thinks that the temple takes money but never delivers prayers, meaning nothing reaches the gods in the end. Dorothy asks Agatha if there is much talk about the High Priestess among the crowd's cheers. Agatha replies in the affirmative. It turns out people are cheering that the High Priestess is the beloved of God, and what happened is thanks to her. Agatha notes with concern, it's strange that the cheers for the High Priestess are more than those for Dorothy, revealing that after reading the High Priestess's thoughts, it seems there are people planted in the crowd. Dorothy realizes if Faith continues to move toward the temple and the High Priestess, it will be hard for the gods to regain their power. Dorothy recalls her shaman mother's words, who taught her a shaman must know how to feel mercy, and that he must pity the people and help them, because this is his role as a bridge between the gods and humans. Dorothy asks Agatha if she can use the power she used to lift the High Priestess in the air on her too. Agatha explains she can't maintain it for long at that height. Dorothy insists she only needs to get down there. The High Priestess is surprised by what she sees. Suddenly, Dorothy flies in the air, sparking everyone's amazement. People scream in awe seeing the saint fly in the sky. Dorothy feels extreme fear. She didn't expect the height to be like this, and discovers she suffers from a phobia of heights. Agatha asks anxiously how she is. Dorothy reassures her she can maintain this height, asking her to keep her flying, while thinking she's about to die from a heart attack. People whisper below, wondering if she really flew, concluding she must be a manifestation of God just as the rumors say. Dorothy lands before the woman carrying her child, calling her by her name, Marion. The woman is shocked, wondering how she knew her name, while Dorothy asks if the child is okay. The woman tells Dorothy while crying that regardless of the hospital or medicine, no improvement occurred in her child's condition, and she no longer knows what to do. Dorothy places her hand gently on the child, reassuring the mother that the Empire's 8 gods and Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, will protect her child. Then she adds with a warm smile that the temple will be by her side too. Dorothy turns to one of the priests, ordering him to guide Marion and prepare food the child can eat. The priest immediately agrees. While the priest leads the woman and her child, Dorothy thinks they are confused because such a thing hasn't happened before. They did nothing but talk about saving believers without providing any actual help. Another woman rushes toward her, telling her her husband was in an accident yesterday, while another asks her to save her too, and a third screams she's about to die of hunger. Dorothy declares loudly there's no need to worry and the temple will intervene for them all, asking those in need of urgent care to head to the Great Temple Infirmary, while the High Priestess stands on the balcony in silence. Dorothy continues her announcement, affirming the gods wish to be by their side and anyone is welcome in the temple, where the 8 holy gods will welcome them. She adds that priests must go to the lowest places, while believers must go to the highest ranks, affirming this is what Goddess Agatha said. Then, asks the High Priestess sarcastically if this is true. Dorothy thinks the High Priestess cannot refuse, if only for the temple's image, and she will have to return everything. All the donations she extorted from believers and the faith that should have gone to them. The High Priestess smiles a forced smile, commenting that the saint indeed overflows with mercy. People's cheers rise, announcing the saint's return and that Goddess Agatha cares for them. With the continued cheers, long live the saint, Dorothy realizes people have begun focusing on her and the gods, feeling satisfied if things continue this way. The High Priestess approaches her and praises her wonderful speech. But Dorothy is surprised by the High Priestess's face, which looks strange. The High Priestess asks her with a scary smile to come to her office immediately, thinking she has something to say to her, while Dorothy wonders in terror if she was always like this. In her office, the High Priestess asks Dorothy why she said that talk without consulting her. Dorothy thinks her face wasn't like this earlier and wonders if she returned to her usual nature. Dorothy asks Agatha if the High Priestess's face looked strange a while ago. She thinks it didn't even look human, but like an evil spirit. Agatha confirms she saw that too, guessing the reason might be the High Priestess's soul is very dark, for a pure soul is transparent or white, but when it corrupts, it takes a gray color. Agatha adds it's the first time she's seen it this dangerous, advising Dorothy to be careful. The High Priestess advances toward Dorothy, telling her she will speak frankly since they're alone, and she never said she could act recklessly as she did earlier. She asks her sharply if she has any idea of the size of the budget allocated to providing relief to subjects, threatening her if she doesn't answer correctly. She must be ready for consequences. Dorothy is confused, but soon pretends fear, and answers that what she did was to prevent the danger that will befall the High Priestess in the future. The High Priestess wonders about what danger. Dorothy asks her if she knows each god possesses unique powers. The High Priestess answers everyone knows that, and Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, cares for the house's harmony. Dorothy explains it's more than that. Vesta, for example, can show real flames, and Agatha can predict the future, although she can't do it now because her power hasn't fully recovered. The High Priestess appears surprised, wondering if the gods possess such specific abilities, noting that it is the first time she has heard of this, and then asks what all of this has to do with the matter at hand. Dorothy replies that Agatha granted her a prophecy today. She clarifies that it is a prophecy concerning the High Priestess's future, and that Agatha does not usually do this for fear that humans would become too dependent on them. Dorothy adds that Agatha cherishes the High Priestess dearly, which arouses surprise in Agatha herself. Dorothy continues her lie, assuring the High Priestess that Agatha cherishes her and that she has heard the Emperor will exert strong pressure on her in the near future. She explains that not only will her position tighten, but her current status will be threatened. Therefore, she needs to win the hearts of the Empire's citizens in preparation for that time. She adds that the position of High Priestess should belong to her alone, prompting the High Priestess to wonder to herself if God is truly on her side. The High Priestess is convinced, thinking this is natural given how much she has expanded within the temple. Dorothy tells her that providing relief to the poor will cost a large sum of the temple's money, but it will enhance their image in the long run. Dorothy continues to persuade her, asserting that it will bring great benefit to the High Priestess, while Agatha marvels at Dorothy's ability to lie so fluently. The High Priestess expresses her happiness that God understands her heart and affirms that investing in the future is necessary. Dorothy thinks to herself that the High Priestess is truly an expert at changing her stances. The High Priestess asks her to prepare for a small tea party hosted by the Marquise of Arlan in a week. Dorothy is surprised, wondering if it is appropriate for a commoner like her to go to a tea party, but the High Priestess reassures her there will be no problem. Dorothy reflects that the Marquise of Arlan is Emperor Theodore's maternal aunt, and that she, like the late Emperor and Empress, is a devout believer. For this reason, she often clashes with Theodore, who lacks faith. Dorothy realizes that currently, the Marquise's family is the only one capable of challenging the Emperor without consequences, and that she enjoys great influence in high society. She concludes that going to a tea party hosted by such a figure means the High Priestess is trying to use her to expand the temple's influence. Following the official greeting of the saint, the temple embarks on extensive relief efforts for the first time in nearly 100 years. While Dorothy's aerial performance remains the talk of the town for a day or two, newspapers are filled with stories about the benevolent High Priestess and her decision to provide relief. Dorothy realizes she is continuing to lose the war of public opinion and that things will be troublesome if they continue this way. She decides she needs to find a way to exercise her own influence over the newspapers. A week later, on her way to the tea party, the High Priestess reminds her that she said she would help her and asks her to refrain from any reckless actions and only do what she says. Dorothy agrees and prepares for the day of the promised party. Upon their arrival at the Marquise's palace, they are welcomed by a servant who tells them the Marquise is waiting for them. Dorothy feels anxious, thinking she was so busy considering the media's reaction that she didn't think much about the tea party. Dorothy asks Agatha for her opinion on the High Priestess's plan, and Agatha explains that everyone attending the tea party is an influential person. She adds that she believes the High Priestess intends to spread bad rumors about the Emperor there and will claim she received a revelation that the sun of the Empire will be stained black and begin to falter. Dorothy concludes that this is the reason for the many recent articles about a saint receiving revelations even without the blue flame, and that they intend to claim she received a revelation regarding the Emperor through her. Agatha tries to warn Dorothy and asks her to be careful. Dorothy calls out to her anxiously, realizing that something is wrong. Dorothy panics when she realizes her connection to Agatha has been cut off again, remembering that this has only happened once before, and wonders anxiously if it is related to the Emperor's presence. A servant announces the arrival of the High Priestess and the Saint, and a woman greets them, saying they are late. Emperor Theodore remarks with a sarcastic smile about his surprise, as he has never seen a guest arrive this late before. adding that his aunt should be more selective with her invitations. Dorothy wonders to herself why her bad feelings are always right and questions why Theodore is here. The High Priestess steps forward and greets the Emperor. The Emperor welcomes them, expressing that he was waiting for them and that it is good to see the Saint has attended as well. Dorothy feels despair, wishing to hide behind the High Priestess forever. She had come here feeling relieved because she heard Theodore would not be at the tea party, realizing that if she meets him now, all her effort to avoid him will go to waste. The High Priestess steps forward and greets the Marquise. The High Priestess asks Dorothy why she hasn't offered a greeting, so Dorothy becomes flustered and answers in the affirmative, thinking she must compose herself on this important occasion. Dorothy greets the Son of the Empire, offering him her greetings and wishing him glory. The Emperor responds with a smile, asking if she is the saint everyone is talking about, adding that he heard she is a precious gift to the Empire and that he is honored to meet her. He asks her to raise her head because the hero of today's party is not him, but the Marquise. The Marquise comments that His Majesty seems to be in a very good mood today, and he answers in the affirmative. The Emperor says that today he has found what he was looking for. Dorothy looks at his facial expression and realizes she is in big trouble. In the garden, the Marquise thanks everyone for coming and asks them to sit. Dorothy sits feeling nervous, wondering why the Emperor is staring at her this way. She notices that the High Priestess looks like someone whose plan to spread bad rumors just failed because the person in question appeared. Realizing she no longer needs the gods to tell her that, she wonders if the Marquise of Arlan's family are devout followers of the Meltaku religion. And if so, what is the meaning of inviting a nephew hostile to the temple to such a place? She concludes that this is nothing more than religious pressure and wonders how his aunt could do that, knowing why her nephew hates this religion, considering the matter exaggerated. Dorothy realizes that without Agatha by her side, she will have to navigate this situation alone. The Emperor thinks that if this meeting ends without any real conversation, the Marquise breaks the silence, praising the saint's story and her wonderful charitable works. Dorothy thanks her, expressing her happiness that the Marquise thinks so. The Marquise asks her if it is true that she flew in the sky, and Dorothy replies that God helped her that day. The Emperor laughs sarcastically, then apologizes, saying the words came out of him unintentionally, and that it is funny to hear such fairy tales in a place like this. The Marquise rebukes him, wondering how he can say that before the saint, to which the Emperor replies that he can do nothing about it. He explains that he simply lacks the faith expected of monarchs and that he cannot believe such fictional stories. Then he announces he will leave first and asks them to enjoy their conversation. The Marquise tries to stop the Emperor, pointing out that the saint, but he interrupts her sharply, calling her by her official name and announcing with a calm smile that his patience has reached its limit. He places his hand on the table firmly, warning her that if she is trying to convince him of her beliefs, it is better for her to stop right there before his patience is completely exhausted. The Marquise becomes flustered, insisting she says this for his own good and that today might be an opportunity for him to gain new faith. At that moment, Dorothy interrupts the scene with a smile, apologizing for her interruption, and announces loudly that God has just delivered a message to her. The Marquise and the High Priestess freeze in their places from shock, wondering in amazement if God has truly spoken to her. Dorothy announces that she must first and foremost speak with His Majesty, then turns directly to him and boldly asks him to grant her the honor of a private meeting. The Emperor looks at her closely while she awaits his response with a mix of nervousness and determination. After a moment of silence, a sarcastic smile appears on his face, and he tells her she is truly annoying, but he stands and agrees to her request, calling her by the title Saint. They move to a secluded wing in the garden where the Emperor orders his guards not to let even a single rat approach. Once they are alone, the Emperor faces her directly, questioning why she wanted to see him, then asks her mockingly whether he should call her Saint or Maria, revealing that he was aware of her fake identity at the temple. Dorothy realizes that the tense atmosphere at the tea party was damaging her image before the Emperor, and that she was forced to act this way. She knows very well that this man has the power to end her life in an instant and that she must explain her position correctly. Even though Agatha's power does not affect him, she clings to her prior knowledge of his character from the events of the original novel, an advantage no one else possesses. Based on this knowledge, she makes a bold decision and announces frankly and without any introductions that her goal is to bring down the Meltaku Church. Her words surprise the Emperor, so she continues her talk, telling him that in order to achieve this goal, she wishes to ally with him. The Emperor asks her in a sarcastic tone how he is to believe the saint herself wishes to dissolve the church she represents, so she asks him to at least listen to her reasons. After a moment of thought, he agrees and orders her to continue. Dorothy begins explaining her position, claiming she was able to hear the voice of God, specifically, the voice of the guardian goddess, Agatha, whom he must know well. She reveals the prophecy she received, which states that the empire is rotting due to the temple's corruption, and that this corruption has weakened the power of the guardian gods, which portends a great disaster in the future. Then she adds that she was also told that His Majesty wishes to get rid of the temple. The emperor thinks that the fact he is a non-believer is well known among the nobles. But Dorothy knows that his desire to eliminate the temple specifically is a personal decision he hasn't announced to everyone. She announces that her motive is to stop the disaster that will befall this world. And in this sense, they share the same goal. The emperor asks her why she lied and claimed her name was Maria at the temple, and she replies that this is not a talk that can be said in a public place and that as a commoner, she wouldn't have been able to request a private meeting with him. She thinks to herself that if she had been exposed as the saint at that time, her fate would have been certain death 100%. The emperor concludes from her words that she used the temple to reach him and that this in itself proves her claim of being the saint is a fact. Dorothy confirms his words and admits it is hard to believe, but it is the truth. The matter grows more mysterious in the emperor's eyes. So he asks her if the gods truly wish to eliminate the temple's corruption, why they chose her specifically to do so. With a sharp look, he asks her why these alleged gods do not perform this task themselves. He adds that even if their power has weakened, they still possess the ability to send revelations, like that damned blue flame. Dorothy confirms the truth of the emperor's words, explaining that only the gods are capable of igniting the blue flame, because no other being can interfere with or fake it. But she clarifies that the matter is completely different regarding prophecies, for corrupt priests can manipulate and distort them whenever they wish. Then she asks the emperor to listen very carefully to what she will say next. Dorothy begins revealing a bitter truth, telling him that in the past, there was a time when the temple announced a false prophecy. The events go back in memory to 16 years ago, where features of pain appear on the emperor's face as he remembers that ill-fated day that claimed the lives of countless innocents. Dorothy reveals she is talking about the tragic outbreak of the plague that struck the empire at that time. The events recall how 16 years ago, a revelation was issued from the temple portending divine punishment that would fall on the land that defies the god's will. Immediately after this announcement, a deadly plague began to spread throughout the empire, and the temple claimed then that the gods were angry because people had neglected them. After a long period of silence and anticipation, the great temple presented an alleged solution, claiming the gods wished to see the devotion of the repentant and demanded they offer sacrifices. At that point, the world fell into a vortex of chaos, as fathers offered their lives as sacrifices to save their daughters. Young sons sacrificed themselves for their mothers, while treasures of gold and silver flowed into the temple without stop, and the former emperor and empress were no exception to this tragedy. For the sake of their second son, they neglected state affairs and visited only the temple, praying and offering jewels. After several years, the plague that appeared for unknown reasons suddenly vanished without a trace, leaving behind countless dead. The young emperor remembers himself standing before a grave, wondering in bitterness if this truly was the god's will, for his family prayed with all they had, pleading with the gods to save his younger brother. Despite all that, his brother died alone in isolation, without even being able to hold his parents' hand or his hand, planting doubt in his heart about the truth of that revelation from the start. Had the alleged god's anger not been announced that day, it would have been possible for the former emperor and empress to investigate the cause of the plague and set countermeasures, instead of wasting time in futile prayers and leaving his brother to die alone. Here, Dorothy reveals the shocking truth. The temple changed the contents of the revelation and issued a false announcement. And that plague actually originated within the temple itself. She explains that the temple was trafficking humans to build its wealth, gathering them together in filth as if they were cattle, and this is what led to the start of the plague. The gods knew the truth, so they issued a revelation to stop the spread of the disease, but the temple deliberately manipulated that revelation and announced it to the public to attract donations and sacrifices. After that, the gods stopped issuing any revelations at all because they realized their messages would never be correctly conveyed to the people. Dorothy confirms this is the truth she heard from the goddess Agatha, who expressed her happiness at meeting her so she could finally set things right, even if it was late. The emperor clenches his hands tightly, thinking he knew the temple was corrupt but never imagined it was this bad. Then he asks her sharply if she can bear responsibility for everything she just said. He warns her in a stern tone that she does not clearly realize what she is interfering in, and that she knows well what will happen if her words are false. Dorothy realizes in her heart that this, as expected, was Theodore's weak point, but she continues persistently, affirming she wants to cooperate with him. She realizes that having reached this point, there is no room for retreat, and that the most important thing now is to tell the truth, even if at the cost of her life, to build trust, rather than just complimenting the other party. In the end, she leaves the decision to him, telling him that whether or not to believe her words is up to him now. The Emperor remarks coldly that the gods truly know all kinds of things, but clarifies that he is capable of achieving what he intends to do alone, even without her, and that he has no special need for cooperation or help. But Dorothy replies immediately, explaining that from her position as the saint, she can monitor the temple's movements without arousing any suspicion. She adds that although His Majesty's intelligence network is extraordinary, this point will be a great advantage for him. As well, the Emperor asks her sharply about the price she will get from all this. He confronts her that he does not believe such hollow ideals of justice, like her desire to cleanse the world with the help of the gods, and asks her if allying with him will bring her some benefit too. Dorothy thinks to herself that his observation is sharp, and admits that the gods promise to grant her a wish if she succeeds in resolving this matter well, and that she does it for that wish. The Emperor asks her curiously what that wish is, so Dorothy hesitates for a moment. She thinks that her real wish is to remove the gods from her life, but she cannot say that, for even if her connection to the gods is cut, they will still be watching her. Therefore, she apologizes and tells him she cannot tell him this matter, but offers him instead another valuable piece of information. She knows the location of the former high priest's secret safe. She explains that this safe is the place where the high priest hid all the donations he embezzled, information that likely none of the Empire's citizens know, then asks him if this is enough information to win his trust. Interest appears on the Emperor's face, so he asks her immediately about its location. Dorothy smiles confidently, realizing she has succeeded, and tells him she cannot tell him immediately but will do so if he promises to cooperate with her. The Emperor remarks coldly that she is bold, wondering if she intends to make a deal with the Emperor of a nation. But Dorothy clarifies her position and explains to him that if His Majesty only recovers the safe without promising to cooperate, she will be completely unprotected and her fate will be death at the hands of the High Priest. Since she is the only person who knows the safe's location, he will certainly pursue her. After a moment of silence, the Emperor reluctantly agrees and tells her he will look into the matter for the time being, so Dorothy rejoices greatly and thanks him warmly. She promises him that alongside the safe, she will gather for him many other weak points he might like, expressing her sincere hope that he will make a positive decision. Before he leaves, Dorothy stops him once more, so he asks her what she wants now. Dorothy admits she lied to him the last time and sincerely apologizes for it. The Emperor smiles a slight smile and remarks that that incident was very touching and that he will think a little about whether he can forgive her. Dorothy is flustered by his response, so she replies she understands that. Then the Emperor turns to leave, bidding her farewell, saying he will see her next time, calling her by the name Maria. Dorothy wonders in amazement if his saying he will see her again means she can consider that a positive sign. Despite everything, she feels relieved. She survived this difficult situation. She realizes Theodore might not accept immediately, but she only needs to become more useful to him, resolving that she will secure his cooperation one day. From a distance, a small boy with dark hair watches her while she was thinking that in this life, she will surely achieve her wish and live a happy life. Meanwhile, the Emperor returns to his carriage feeling very annoyed. The idea that the plague originated in the temple is not surprising to him, for the temple he knows is more than capable of committing such acts. But he realizes that without a single piece of evidence, the matter is nothing more than a wild claim. And above all, the one who raised this story is none other than the temple's saint herself. He wonders how he is supposed to believe that, but he cannot bear the level of annoyance he feels thinking about the what if it were true. After all, she is a saint who appeared suddenly and, moreover, personally led the temple's relief efforts. The Emperor remembers that at the moment she met him, she was terrified, but this time she asked him for cooperation. He continues thinking about his confusion, for he cannot understand her true intentions at all. He mutters to himself that she is truly a strange woman. Meanwhile, on the way back, the High Priestess asks Dorothy about her long conversation with the Emperor and what they discussed specifically. She adds in a warning tone that she hopes she didn't say anything unnecessary. Dorothy thinks to herself that she certainly cannot tell her she suggested to the Emperor that they cooperate to bring down the temple. Agatha tells Dorothy that the High Priestess seems very angry, and Dorothy concludes this is natural. Between the Emperor's sudden arrival and her going out of her control, nothing went as planned. Dorothy decides she must calm her for the time being, so she tells her that she of course didn't do that. On the contrary, she requested a private meeting with His Majesty for the High Priestess's sake. She adds in a persuasive tone that she wondered if the High Priestess didn't wish to stay constantly informed of His Majesty's status, and that this is the reason that prompted her to make her decision. With artificial enthusiasm, Dorothy announces that from now on, she will steal the Emperor's heart. The High Priestess is stunned, wondering in confusion what she is talking about. She considers this matter ridiculous, for everyone in the Empire knows the Emperor has no interest in women. The High Priestess interrupts her suddenly, shouting and wondering how she met the Emperor in the Great Temple and why she wasn't informed of this matter sooner. Dorothy pretends to be surprised, wondering if she didn't know, believing she was already. Aware of the presence of many witnesses, while thinking to herself that she of course wouldn't know because she only told the High Priestess what she needed to hear, she explains that on the day she arrived from Dumong, His Majesty approached her in the prayer room. She adds that at that moment, the god spoke to her and told her the Emperor shows interest in her. Internally, Dorothy encourages herself to be bold, for the High Priestess doesn't know her connection to the gods is cut near Theodore. The High Priestess wonders if the Emperor is truly interested in the saint, so Dorothy confirms that, and reminds her of her abilities. The High Priestess asks her if this is the reason she spoke with him, to confirm his feelings. So Dorothy replies she felt his heart had begun to soften. The High Priestess repeats the word soften in confusion, so Dorothy confirms that. She adds that it seems His Majesty was a bit cautious because she is the saint, but she believes that through their talk, he finally opened up to her. She elaborates that the Emperor did not interrupt her once while she talked about demolishing the temple, and that he focused on every small thing she mentioned, like the details of her secret safe. Dorothy asks the High Priestess, if this isn't interest, what could it be? The High Priestess marvels at the idea that Theodore, who never lets anyone finish a sentence, listened to someone to the end. Agatha feels very impressed and whispers to Dorothy that she plays this role brilliantly and that she is truly talented. Dorothy continues to persuade the High Priestess, saying he might not have cared about women in the past, but perhaps changed his mind after meeting her. The High Priestess is convinced, thinking that if this is the case, things have gone well. Dorothy feels satisfied, thinking she seems to have taken the bait entirely. But Agatha whispers to her anxiously, reminding her that if they cooperate with the Emperor, they will have to reveal the truth in the end, and asks her if she has thought of that too. Dorothy is flustered for a moment and admits she hasn't thought about it that far. Dorothy thinks to herself that if Theodore discovers the truth, he will surely try to kill her. Meanwhile, in the Imperial Palace, the Emperor orders his assistant to investigate the plague case that happened 16 years ago and refuses his request to bring the recorded documents. Instead, he orders him to search everything thoroughly, from the initial plague outbreak site to the nearby hills, and re-examine all suspicious abandoned houses and soil contamination and everything else. The assistant is surprised by this, pointing out that 16 years have passed and it will be difficult to find any new evidence. But the Emperor insists they move immediately, emphasizing the need to find anything no matter what. The Emperor thinks that if the saint was right, and the plague indeed started in a human trafficking den, something must have appeared in the investigation. But he remembers that no trace was found at GU site, meaning even the alleged origin of the plague might be fabricated. Then he orders his assistant to investigate the High Priest again, pointing to the possibility of a secret safe. The assistant reminds the Emperor they investigated him even a few years ago and found nothing, and that the Emperor himself was the one who ordered the investigation closed, so the Emperor admits that. But he remembers the steadiness of Dorothy's gaze when she talked about being his partner and how her eyes didn't waver even once. Even though there is no guarantee that what that woman believes is the truth, and that she might be asserting a mere illusion as if it were fact, strangely, he continues to think her words might indeed be true, something even he himself doesn't understand. In the end, he issues his order to proceed with the investigations for the time being. A few days later, in her room, Dorothy is surprised to find herself floating in the air and screams calling, "Lady Agatha." Dorothy asks in amazement when she became able to lift her this high, and Agatha replies she feels most of her power has returned, and she can even keep her higher than that for a full 5 minutes. Dorothy marvels at the idea of 5 minutes and expresses her happiness at the steady return of Agatha's power, and Agatha agrees, but points out there is still an unresolved problem. Dorothy clarifies that the problem is buying the newspapers. She remembers that the industrial development in this novel is in a transitional stage, with railroads and steam engines, and once a newspaper is published, it spreads throughout the Empire within a week at most. The press's influence in the Empire was great, and most of it was controlled behind the scenes by the High Priest. Dorothy remembers that when she first appeared, the articles made the High Priest look like the main character in all events. Dorothy realizes that if she wants to spread her name as the saint more widely, buying a newspaper is essential, and even though it seems a bit bad, it is unavoidable. Agatha reveals she has looked into the weak points of the heads of the major newspapers as Dorothy requested, like Empire Morning and Daily Empire. but she was unable to find any notable weak points, and it seems there is no other way than direct purchase with money. But Dorothy feels frustrated. She can no longer practice fortune-telling to earn money, and as the saint, she doesn't have much money she can use freely. Dorothy suggests doing one last big operation, like betting everything. Agatha rejects the idea entirely, fearing the news spreading would destroy her reputation, so Dorothy notes she almost gave up just now. Dorothy is puzzled about what she should do. She realizes winning over the press is essential for her role as the saint, and also to prove her worth to Theodore. While she thinks there must be a clever way, she glimpses something. She sees a small child wandering around and wonders why a child is in such a place. Suddenly, the god Horty, the god of children, appears and calls Dorothy. Horty pleads with her and asks her to help that child. Agatha is surprised and tells Horty she never expected him to come out and ask for help himself, so Horty replies he will explain the details later. Dorothy remembers Horty is the god who protects children, so she agrees to understand the situation for the time being. Dorothy approaches the little boy and wonders to herself what reasons might prompt a child like him to sneak into this place and greets him kindly. She bends down to his level and asks him about his identity, so the boy seems very flustered. Dorothy examines him closely and realizes his appearance is shabby and his clothes worn out, which raises a question in her mind about whether he is one of the homeless street children. The boy gathers his courage and answers in a low and hesitant voice, identifying himself as Henry. Dorothy contemplates his state and thinks that despite the care programs they launched for the homeless and the distribution of aid, it is clear there are places their efforts haven't reached yet. She asks him why he came here, and Henry tells her he heard the temple distributes supplies, and since he is a citizen of the Empire, he wanted to get some. Hearing his words and seeing his thin body, Dorothy realizes he is hungry, so she offers him help and invites him to go with her to feed him. Dorothy provides Henry with a delicious meal, so the boy looks at the food with wide eyes of amazement, not believing he can eat all this by himself, and Dorothy confirms with a smile that he can, pointing out she enjoys high status here. She feels great happiness seeing him eat greedily and passionately. She thinks that her authority as the saint has indeed increased, for normally no one is allowed into the temple's great dining hall, but with her presence, no one dared to stop this child. Shortly after, Henry finishes his food entirely, expressing his gratitude for the delicious meal. But he hesitates a bit, then asks her politely if he can take the remaining food with him, so Dorothy asks him why. Henry tells her he has many friends waiting for him, and they all live together, and would be very happy if he brought them some food. Dorothy is shocked by his words and concludes that all his friends are children in his situation, likely living together because they have no parents. She realizes that buying the newspaper, which was occupying her mind, can wait. There is a more urgent matter now. With a heart overflowing with kindness, Dorothy decides she cannot ignore these children and tells Henry they will bring plenty of food for his friends too, and that she will help him carry it because it will be heavy. Henry and Dorothy walk together, and when they reach their destination, Henry calls out to his friends, Lizzie, Jill, Chris, announcing his return. Children peer from the door, and a girl named Lizzie rebukes him for disappearing without a word, telling him the note he left was in unreadable handwriting. Henry tells her enthusiastically that he brought supplies and food from the temple, so Lizzie asks him disapprovingly why he did that, for the official supplies would arrive in 2 days. But Henry answers innocently that everyone was hungry. Lizzie stops talking suddenly when her eyes fall on Dorothy standing behind Henry. In extreme terror of an adult's presence, Lizzie pulls Henry and the rest of the children inside quickly, screaming at him and wondering if he's gone crazy to bring an adult here. They close the door firmly in her face. Dorothy stands in total confusion, wondering at the reason for their reaction full of fear and hostility. At that moment, the god Horty appears and reveals to her the shocking truth. These children escaped from an orphanage where they were being abused, so Dorothy is stunned. Horty explains he could only watch them until now, but after regaining a small part of his divine power, he was able to guide Henry, the one with the purest soul, to her. Horty pleads with Dorothy and asks her to save these abandoned and lonely children. Dorothy is deeply moved when she realizes the god Horty was watching these children all this time, and her resolve to help them increases. She moves toward the closed door and greets those inside, identifying herself as Saint Dorothy, wondering if they have heard of her. The children hear her voice, and one wonders if she is that recently famous figure. But Lizzie screams that she is a liar. It's inconceivable that a great saint would come to a place like this. Lizzie screams in her face angrily and orders her to leave, announcing that adults cannot be trusted. Dorothy realizes the difficult situation. As long as this child, Lizzie, is entrenched in her hostile stance, she won't be able to feed them or help them, and she must find a way to convince them to come out. An idea suddenly flashes in Dorothy's mind, so she finds the desired solution and reaches a way to convince the children to come out, calling immediately for Lady Vesta's help. The goddess Vesta, goddess of the hearth, manifests before her, wondering in amazement why she called. Dorothy asks her for help, explaining she needs her power to convince the children to come out of their hiding place. The plan is to heat the food using Vesta's divine power, in hopes that the delicious food smell will attract the hungry children outside, so she decides to try anyway. Indeed, Dorothy uses the goddess's power to ignite a magical flame between her hands. The man who is helping her is amazed, and it pushes him to express his amazement at this miracle the saint is performing. Vesta expresses that the matter was successful, noting that although controlling power through a human body is difficult, Dorothy's body is an amazing vessel for divine power. Dorothy accepts this compliment with gratitude, even though in her heart she prefers being a normal human to being an extraordinary vessel. As the smell of hot food wafts through the air, Dorothy addresses her call to the children to come out and enjoy the feast. It doesn't take long for the pleasant aroma to seep into their hiding place and pique their appetite. Hunger overcomes fear, and the children rush outside, ignoring Lizzie's desperate attempts to stop them. The small group gathers around the table and begins devouring the food greedily. Dorothy looks at them with a kind smile and advises them to eat slowly so they don't get sick. After they finish their food, Lizzie faces Dorothy with a look full of doubt and hostility, questioning her true intentions and accusing her that her apparent kindness is only a prelude to torturing them again, adding she knows everything. Dorothy tries to approach her and offer her a piece of bread, reintroducing herself as Saint Dorothy, but Lizzie refuses to believe her. She continues her accusation that she plans to traffic them or exploit them as pawns to make money. Although Dorothy assures her that all she wants is for them to eat their fill, she realizes it is better not to approach more for now. Lizzie insists on not believing her, considering igniting the fire was just a trick. When Dorothy calls her by her name again, Lizzie screams in her face angrily to stop calling her. The gods surrounding Dorothy notice that Lizzie's extreme caution indicates she suffered hard times for a long time. Then Agatha reveals a stunning truth. Lizzie is not from the common people. Rather, she is a lost child from the Bardi family, one of the 4 great ducal families in the Empire. Dorothy is shocked at hearing this unexpected news. She thinks that the Berardis are known by the title Nobles of Nobles, raising a deep question in her mind about why a child of such high status is in an orphanage. Dorothy realizes immediately that helping Lizzie will grant her a great strategic advantage in her future plans. But she, regardless of any potential gains, feels a sincere desire to help this child. Faced with Lizzie's insistence that all adults are liars and she won't be fooled, Dorothy decides to prove her identity to her in an undeniable way. She tells her that if she doesn't believe she is a saint, perhaps this will help her believe, then uses her divine power to lift Lizzie into the air gently. Lizzie is completely shocked at this supernatural scene, wondering in a state of disbelief if the woman before her is indeed a true saint. With a confident smile, Dorothy confirms there is a reason for the saying that seeing is believing and repeats to her that she is Dorothy, the saint of the Great Temple. Dorothy acknowledges she knows there are many bad adults, but asks Lizzie kindly to try to trust her, even if just for this once. Lizzie whispers in confusion, wondering about the reason that would drive a true saint to come to a place like this. Dorothy hugs the child tenderly and tells her she heard the voice of the god Horti asking her to help children, and confirms this is her wish too. Lizzie thinks to herself while in Dorothy's arms that she was absolutely sure adults don't care about them at all. Dorothy replies calmly, expressing her sincere desire to see Lizzie happy. To dispel her remaining doubts, she offers her a piece of bread and tells her she will eat from it first to prove it isn't poisoned, so Lizzie thanks her hesitantly. Thus, after some turns and difficult situations, Dorothy finally succeeds in winning Lizzie's heart and trust. Now that the children are under her protection, she realizes that all that remains now is to have a decisive confrontation with the temple. 2 priests from the temple are surprised to see the saint accompanied by these children and wonder in amazement about their identity. Dorothy announces sternly that from now on, the temple will take over the care of these children, so one of the priests tries to object, noting the high priest won't agree. Dorothy interrupts him and reminds them of the temple's fundamental role, which is to be a safe haven for the poor, the lost, the sick, and the orphans, questioning in an indisputable tone whether that is the case or not. Then she threatens them coldly, wondering if they wish for her to reveal their secrets too. So the priest is terrified and agrees immediately to escort her inside. Dorothy walks confidently in the temple hallways, thinking there are many vacant rooms anyway. She opens her wardrobe to find that everything in it is white dresses with a holy design, prepared for her by the high priest. She concludes he aims to establish her image as the saint, but she decides these clothes have their uses too, and chooses what suits her. She packs her bags, resolving she will use this look to find Lizzie's parents and to get what she needs as, well. The scene shifts to the Berardi Ducal Palace, one of the 4 great families in the Empire. Duchess Berardi sits in her office, complaining that her sight and wisdom are deteriorating together. She adds that movement has become more difficult with each passing day, and that it has truly become time to step down from her position. She sighs with regret, wishing that incident had never occurred, for then she wouldn't have had to suffer all these worries. A knock is heard at the door, so she permits the knocker to enter, and a man rushes inside in a state of panic, calling her, "Your Highness." The man announces that the saint has arrived at the palace, so the Duchess wonders in amazement which saint he is talking about. While they walk in the hallway, the Duchess asks if she is the saint who appeared in the newspapers, and the man replies he doesn't know her face specifically, but whoever arrived is undoubtedly a saint in anyone's eyes. The Duchess thinks this is some kind of nonsense. When her eyes fall on Dorothy, surrounded by a halo of light, the Duchess is stunned by her aura and radiance. Dorothy apologizes for the sudden visit, so the Duchess confirms to herself that she is undoubtedly the true saint. The Duchess asks her how she came here, and Dorothy replies she received a divine call, and that is why she came despite the sudden intrusion. Pleasure floods the Duchess's heart, and she wonders if this means her family will have the honor of receiving a prophecy from the saint. She feels very proud of this visit and invites her in. She orders her head servant to make arrangements immediately, and he agrees compliantly, while Dorothy smiles in the background calmly and confidently. Dorothy contemplates her new appearance and is shocked by the power of the blessing from Euphrosyne, the goddess of beauty. She thinks that this goddess's power has not yet fully recovered, yet she has granted her this astonishing level of beauty, and she wishes she had known this and asked for her help sooner. Dorothy asks the goddess Agatha about the high priest's whereabouts, fearing he might discover her departure, and Agatha reassures her that he is still outside the temple, which makes Dorothy feel relieved. Dorothy recalls the events. She was certain the high priest would interrogate her if he found out, so she had to sneak out without using the temple carriage. She believed she would have difficulty proving her identity as a saint, but thanks to the beauty blessing from Lady Euphrosyne, everything went smoothly. At the Ducal Palace, the Duchess of Berardi apologizes for her inability to host her properly and asks if she is comfortable, so Dorothy thanks her for the welcome despite her sudden visit. The Duchess curiously asks about the divine call she mentioned and exactly what the gods told her. Dorothy tells her that the gods informed her that her grace is drowned in great sorrow and that they ordered her to help her. The Duchess is deeply moved, realizing that the gods were indeed watching them, and Dorothy thinks that empathizing with and consoling someone drowned in grief is a fundamental principle of persuasion, and that she came here to offer goodness. Dorothy moves toward her and addresses her directly, revealing that she knows she is currently burdened with worries about her heir. The Duchess confirms the truth of her words, admitting that she is indeed in a difficult position due to the matter of succession, and realizes that the gods already know everything. Suddenly, a man enters, addressing the Duchess as Mother, and announces that he will renounce his position as heir. When Dorothy examines the scene, she realizes that this man is Lord Caden. She concludes the shocking truth. Lord Caden, the second son of the Berardi family, is Lizzie's father. Dorothy recalls the details of the novel. In noble families, the eldest son usually inherits the title, but the eldest son of the Berardi family was dissolute and corrupt. As a result, the Duke could not accept his eldest son as the heir, and naturally the intelligent second son, Caden Berardi, became the most likely successor. Because of this, daily power struggles erupted within the Berardi family. Then, 8 years ago, while Caden was about to be confirmed as the head of the family, his desperate brothers kidnapped his newborn daughter, Lizzie, and planned to use her as a bargaining chip to seize the ducal title. However, while they were quarreling among themselves over who would keep the child, the infant disappeared in an instant. The young master Caden and his wife launched a search far too late and could never find her. Because of the family's status, they could not reveal the incident publicly, and eventually announced that the child had died due to her weak constitution. The shocked Duchess collapsed onto her sickbed, and rumors spread that Caden had gone mad and isolated himself from the world. All of this happened while the child was still alive. Dorothy thinks that this time must have been painful for both Lizzie and her father, and resolves that, even though it is late, she must reunite them. Dorothy realizes she knows the truth shown to her by the gods, but in an age where blood tests do not exist, merely presenting Lizzie would not be enough to prove her lineage. and she must push this matter by creating the right atmosphere. Meanwhile, the Duchess tells Caden that someone has come to look after their family. Dorothy thinks that this must be the reason for the Duchess's hesitation regarding the heir. She wants her second son to be the head, but circumstances do not allow it. Dorothy steps forward and asks him to trust her. He asks her in amazement what she just said, so she replies that she can see the future, if only for a brief moment. She asks him if he knows what divination is and announces that she will demonstrate her skills for the first time in a while. Dorothy performs the divination ritual before them. Caden and the Duchess stand in a state of shock and bewilderment at the scene. The Duchess wonders to herself that when Dorothy said divination, she thought she would pray like ordinary priests. But she concludes that for a saint who hears the voices of the gods directly, the method of receiving revelation must be completely different. Dorothy uses her divination tools and announces that the gods are pointing to the second young master of the Bardi family. She offers Caden to pull a flag, so he pulls a blue flag and wonders in confusion about its meaning. In a serious tone, Dorothy tells him she sees that within the ducal house, he seems to have lost something. She adds that what he lost is something extremely precious. And Caden remarks sharply, considering this an overly obvious interpretation, as it is natural to feel sorrow after hearing of his daughter's death. His anger increases, and he accuses her of trying to incite discord in the ducal house. But she calmly responds in the negative. Then, with a voice full of certainty, Dorothy announces the shocking truth. The child is still alive and that what the gods indicated was not death, but a disappearance. Caden is overcome with profound shock, wondering what she just said. Overwhelmed with emotion, he covers his mouth and asks in a trembling voice if his child is alive somewhere. Dorothy confirms this to him, telling him that the gods never lie. Caden loses control of himself and grabs her hands, pleading in desperation for her to tell him where he should go to meet his child. Dorothy begins to reveal her vision, describing to him a place with a small river and a stone bridge under the moonlight. The Duchess confirms that such a stream indeed exists. Dorothy elaborates that Horty, the god of children, loves moonlit nights, and that there is a legend saying he comes down to dance with children on full moon nights. She reveals that Horty is the one who granted her this revelation and orders him to go to the river in the west on the night of the full moon. There, she promises him he will find his precious child. After several hours of waiting by the river, despair begins to creep into Caden's heart, and he thinks it is impossible for a child to come to this place so late at night. He whispers his daughter's name, Juliet, a name he never had the chance to call her, expressing how much he misses her. Suddenly, he hears a child's voice calling him, "Sir," and he turns to see a small boy before him. Henry asks him if a little girl has passed by here. Caden answers in the negative and feels disappointed, believing it won't be that easy, and decides to give up and return. But suddenly, the scene is interrupted by the voice of a girl calling, "Henry," and rebuking him for coming to this distant place. The girl moves toward them and asks Henry what he would have done if she weren't there. Caden looks at the girl and realizes she is Lizzie. Caden is stunned when he realizes she has exactly the same eyes as his wife, and wonders to himself if this child could be. Lizzie screams in panic upon seeing an adult and asks Henry to come to her. Caden tries to calm her, asking her to wait for a moment, as he only wants to ask her something. He tells her he is not a stranger and that he is a noble and can prove his identity. But she thinks, sarcastically, believing that his being a noble would only make committing crimes easier. Caden thinks to himself that the more he looks at Lizzie, the more she looks like her mother, while Lizzie threatens to scream if he comes any closer. Caden tried to calm Lizzie, assuring her he would not come any closer, but he pleaded with her to listen to what he had to say just once. After hesitation, Lizzie agreed to listen to him, so Caden began to narrate his painful story. He told her he had a daughter dear to his heart, but bad people caused her disappearance when she was still an infant, which sparked Lizzie's surprise. Caden continued his talk, explaining that he spent 8 years searching for her in vain, so Lizzie was moved by his story and thought that she, too, has no parents and is 8 years old. Lizzie told him that she felt a great similarity between the child's story and her own, so the other person is shocked. Caden asked her if she knew the old saying that parents can always recognize their children. When Lizzie asked him in confusion about the meaning of his words, he revealed the touching truth to her, announcing that she is his daughter. With a voice full of longing, he called her by her true name, Juliet, and the child broke into tears. Caden pleaded with her to allow him to hug her, so Lizzie asked him with tears filling her eyes if she was truly his daughter and if he had abandoned her, which was her greatest fear. Caden knelt before her and assured her with love that he never abandoned her and that he waited all this time just to meet her again and invited her into his arms. He embraced her tightly, whispering her name Juliet with words overflowing with emotion. While he was hugging her, Caden thanked the gods with all his heart for finally returning his daughter to him. From afar, Dorothy was watching the moving scene with the gods and felt great relief at the success of her plan. She had taken the children to a night market held west of the capital during the full moon and used the god Horty's power to guide them to where Caden was waiting. The god Horty thanked her warmly, but Dorothy humbly replied that she had only conveyed his words. Horty expressed regret over the weakness of his power, wishing he could help all children find their families himself. Horty's sincere words stirred Dorothy's emotions, making her realize that the gods of this world care for humans much more than she had imagined. For they were, unlike the gods in her old world who brought her only illness and misery, true protectors of humanity. She wondered to herself how these kind gods would feel if she asked them to sever her connection with them after everything was finished. Later, Caden presented Dorothy with a box full of gold and jewels as a token of thanks, but she politely refused, affirming she did not help him out of greed for any reward. Despite her surprise at the value of this wealth, Caden insisted he had no other way to express his gratitude, so he offered her a smaller box instead. Dorothy opened the box to find a remarkably beautiful bracelet inside, so Caden told her it was made of a rare metal from the Pisa Mountains, and it is said that nature spirits dwell in it and provide protection for the wearer, assuring her it wasn't too precious, so Dorothy accepted it with gratitude. Dorothy contemplated the bracelet Caden had given her and felt a mysterious aura emanating from it. The goddess Agatha explained to her that the stone carries a spirit, which sparked Dorothy's amazement. The gods reminded her that nature is full of spiritual energy, so Dorothy compared the matter in her mind to the germanium bracelets in her old world. Agatha reassured her that the bracelet is harmless, and all it does is slightly enhance her energy and vitality. She added that the spirit's power harmonizes specifically with Dorothy, so Dorothy concluded it would be useful to keep it near her. Lizzie interrupted Dorothy and Caden's conversation and ran toward her, calling her sister. The child embraced Dorothy warmly, expressing how much she missed her, and Dorothy welcomed her kindly. Dorothy told her she could visit her at the temple whenever she missed her or her friends, so Lizzie happily agreed. Caden intervened gently and asked Lizzie to go visit her mother. He explained to her that her mother had not been well, and that seeing her would make her very happy. Lizzie's face lit up and she agreed immediately, calling him father before she left. After Lizzie left, Caden apologized to Dorothy and asked for her advice on another matter concerning his daughter. For despite his overwhelming happiness at her return, he was worried that the Emperor's involvement in the succession dispute might complicate matters. He expressed his fear that this might expose her to danger again, especially since her death had been announced to the public, which could spark a great scandal. What worried him most was that the newspapers might exploit the story and cause harm to Lizzie. But Dorothy, instead of worrying, saw this situation as a great opportunity for herself. She reassured the Duke that there was no need to worry and suggested they seek an answer from the gods once more. A few days later, newspapers led with headlines announcing the resolution of the Bardi family inheritance dispute and the survival of Caden Bardi's daughter. Dorothy felt satisfied as she read the news, realizing that Caden indeed possesses a brilliant strategic mindset. The events returned in memory to a few days ago when Dorothy suggested her plan to Caden, who seemed surprised by her request to buy a newspaper company. Dorothy presented the matter as a divine message, announcing that the time has come to launch the attack and that attack is the best means of defense, urging him to buy the newspaper entirely. She told him he must expose his brother's crimes to the world, assuring him he would become a hero in the eyes of the people because he eliminated corruption and achieved justice. When Caden asked her if there was a suitable newspaper, she answered in the affirmative. Thus, thanks to the Bardi family's wealth, Caden easily acquired the Empire morning newspaper, exposed his brother's cruelty, and announced that Lizzie is his legitimate daughter. With this, the succession conflict ended, and as a token of gratitude, the Bardi family made sure to publish many positive stories about the saint and the gods in the press. Dorothy realized she now possessed powerful allies and that Caden had promised to continue helping her. Despite the success of the plan, she found herself overwhelmed by a vast number of fan letters, wondering what she should do with them. The newspaper had allocated a special corner for her titled The Saint's Daily Life to collect testimonies about her alleged charitable acts. Although she agreed to this as a means to enhance faith and direct people's attention toward the gods, she noticed the High Priestess's gazes were becoming colder and that fan letters would not stop flowing, which was not exactly what she wanted. But in the end, she considered this a good indicator, and that things had begun to change in her favor, so she encouraged herself to move forward. In the Imperial Palace, the Emperor was reading the Empire morning newspaper and noticed its tone had changed. His assistant confirmed to him that it was the same newspaper that exposed the Bardi family scandal, and that it is now publishing articles intensively to protect the recovered duke's daughter. The emperor thought that the Bardi family possessed enough wealth to influence the newspaper entirely. Then he began connecting the dots. The return of the lost duke's daughter after 8 years, coinciding with the newspaper he bought publishing positive reports about the saint, could not be a mere coincidence. The emperor recalled his first meeting with her and remembered she was bolder than she appeared. Then a cunning smile formed on his face as he thought about the upcoming birthday party of the Marquise of Maland. He knows his aunt venerates the saint and must have already sent her an invitation. Although he does not like parties, he saw in this party the perfect place to give his answer to Dorothy. The day of the party arrived, and 2 noble ladies were whispering about the saint's attendance. They wondered about her arrival time, and one mentioned she would enter accompanied by the Marquise. Indeed, their entry together was announced, and Dorothy appeared with a charming look. Those present were dazzled by her breathtaking beauty, whispering in amazement. Dorothy thanked the goddess Euphrosyne in her heart, who granted her the beauty blessing. Then she realized an important fact. The continued effect of the blessing meant Emperor Theodore had not yet arrived. For if he were near, her connection with spirits would be cut and the blessing would disappear. She felt relieved and decided to start executing her plan to connect with the nobles until his arrival. Dorothy realized, based on what Agatha told her, that thanks to the recent tea party and newspaper articles, nobles had begun sending invitations to the temple. But the high priestess was hiding these invitations from her, hoping to build personal relationships with the nobles herself. So she attended social events instead of her, exploiting opportunities to enhance her own influence. But Dorothy planned that if she showed her face at a large gathering like today's party, she would receive invitations from more influential nobles, and the high priestess would no longer be able to intercept her. The Marquise welcomed her guests and thanked them for attending her modest party. Then she proudly announced her hosting of the Empire's saint and encouraged everyone to speak with her freely. Guests flocked to Dorothy, expressing their honor at meeting her and their admiration for her radiant beauty. Dorothy thanked them kindly and expressed her happiness at meeting them all. Then she shyly admitted this was her first party and that she was afraid it would be scary, but she found everyone to be very kind and warm. Her admission stirred the sympathy of the nobles who raced to offer her assistance, which increased their positive impression of her. Dorothy thought to herself that the effect of the beauty blessing seemed very strong. Dorothy sat with some ladies, enjoying talking with them and realizing she didn't know how enjoyable these gatherings were, as she had been confined in the temple all the time. One of the ladies wondered why she hadn't taken a tour of the capital yet, so Dorothy replied she was busy assisting with the temple's work. The guests felt sorry, and one suggested she visit Weeping Lake near their estate. But another guest objected that the place was too far, and suggested instead the lake on Count Gordon's private land, and they offered to host her there. Dorothy expressed her surprise at the noble's generosity and accepted Count Gordon's invitation, considering it would be an honor for his family. But suddenly, a red-haired lady interrupted their talk with a sarcastic smile, expressing her surprise that the saint is so open to receiving invitations. She added she heard Dorothy had ignored quite a few invitations, wondering if she had changed her mind. Dorothy realized she had finally found the person she was looking for. Someone from a family the high priestess had deemed unimportant and ignored their invitation, for she knew there must be at least one person at this party harboring a grudge because of this neglect. Dorothy remembered the lady's name, Victoria Hansen, and felt flustered. She hadn't received any invitations at all. Also, she was meeting most people at the party for the first time. Her words stirred whispers among those present, as one mentioned his family had sent an invitation as well, as did others, and they all believed she was busy because they received no response. Dorothy denied the matter strongly, confirming she received none of these invitations and asked them if they had sent them to the Great Temple addressed directly to her. Mrs. Hansen confirmed her servant had personally delivered it to the saint at the temple. In fact, she made sure he had given it to the high priestess's assistant. Then she directed her question directly to the high priestess, who was watching the scene silently. After a moment of tension, the high priestess claimed her assistant was new and seemed to have acted on his own. She added she had previously caught him searching through her desk drawers but gave him a chance to repent, concluding that people do not change easily. Then she bowed before Mrs. Hansen, apologizing for this negligence and asking for her forgiveness. Mrs. Hansen felt embarrassed and apologized in turn for the misunderstanding. But Dorothy realized that if she allowed the high priestess to control the situation this way, she would lose everything. So she asked Mrs. Hansen to send her another invitation. Mrs. Hansen was surprised, so Dorothy grabbed her hands, assuring her the invitation would definitely reach her this time, and that she would like to meet and talk with all those present. The High Priestess realized that now, after this public promise, she would no longer be able to hide Dorothy's invitations. Dorothy felt satisfied and breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that for now, she is still in everyone's eyes just a normal girl happy with her success, knowing nothing about noble society, someone oblivious to the High Priestess's schemes, and that her only weapon is public opinion. Despite feeling exhausted from using these devious methods, she was waiting for the arrival of the star of the party, wondering why he was late. Suddenly, she glimpsed someone sitting in a tree, wondering if he was looking for her. When their eyes met, she realized it was Emperor Theodore. She asked him in confusion what he was doing up there, and he replied that he saw her heading to this place from afar. And since everyone's attention was focused on her inside, he had no other choice but to climb the tree. Dorothy wondered at his behavior. He is the emperor of an entire empire, yet he climbs a tree and realized he thinks in a completely different way than she does. Dorothy noted his lateness, so he remarked that there is no good in arriving early to parties. But he quickly added that this isn't what's important now. Suddenly, he jumped from the tree toward the balcony where she was standing. Dorothy was panicked, fearing he would fall, and screamed that he couldn't do that. The Emperor landed gracefully on the balcony and asked her mockingly what she thought he couldn't do. Dorothy was flustered and told him she thought he would fall, feeling her heart beating strongly. The Emperor wondered at her concern, considering she worries about strange things. Dorothy thought to herself that the strange person here is him, for normal people don't jump from trees like this. But she decided to get straight to the point. She asked him why he avoided everyone's eyes and met her alone. He replied he had made his decision and came to give her his answer to her offer. The Emperor began his talk, explaining he was unable to verify the truth of her words, especially regarding the plague case that happened 16 years ago. Therefore, he had to exert great effort to track any trace of it. Dorothy realized it is natural not to find any trace of a plague that happened long ago, and that Theodore knows this well. But the fact that he had moved and started the investigation anyway indicated how desperate he was. Dorothy felt guilty, as if she had stirred an old wound, so she apologized to him, which sparked his surprise. Dorothy tried to clarify, considering he doesn't know her story and that the matter must have been exhausting for him. The Emperor continued his surprise, so he asked her why she apologized, and she replied she felt sorry he went through all this because of her, and that it would be sad if all his effort went to waste. The Emperor reassured her his subordinates were the ones who did the work and there was no need to worry. Then he admitted that currently, he doesn't know if there is any way to confirm the truth of what happened at that time. He remarked coldly that this represents one less reason for him to cooperate with her. Dorothy was shocked, disbelieving what she heard. The Emperor noticed she was starting to lose her confidence and told her she was free to withdraw her offer if she wanted. Dorothy denied the matter strongly, so he asked her about the other reason she had left, and she reminded him of the High Priest's secret safe. Dorothy remembered she told him she wouldn't reveal its location unless they worked together, but the Emperor revealed the truth to her, which was that he had not intended to cooperate with her from the start, and that his assistant Isaac was the one who told him she might be useful after discovering she had won the second son of the Bardi family to her side behind the High Priestess's back. He added that nevertheless, he was unable to make a final decision, for he considered everything she said, from the plague story to her claim she is not a pawn in the High Priestess's hand, unworthy of belief. But Dorothy interrupted him firmly and promised him she would make him believe her from now on. He looked at her for a moment, then answered with one word, no. Then he added he would cooperate with her, but he wouldn't trust her. He had confirmed he would lose nothing by working with her. Then he warned her in a stern tone that if she made him regret his decision, he would make her life full of nothing but regret. Dorothy agreed immediately and promised to do her best so as not to disappoint him. She reassured him she knows how dangerous he is and that she values her life very much. His assistant interrupted them, reminding the Emperor that the Marquise was looking for him and that he should return. Then the Emperor pointed out she is under the High Priestess's monitoring and that they would need to determine a place to meet the next time. But Dorothy surprised him and told him she had already informed the High Priestess that she was trying to seduce him. She explained that if he came to the temple directly, the High Priestess would simply believe she had succeeded in her mission and would be pleased with that. Dorothy ends her conversation with the Emperor with a bright smile, playfully suggesting he come to visit her in person or send a carriage to take her to the palace for a private visit, then bids him a confident farewell, looking forward to their next meeting. But as soon as she turned her back, her smile faded and was replaced by a deep sense of relief. She had just escaped the danger of death at his hands. In the midst of her thinking, she realized this situation represents the perfect excuse to evade the High Priestess's monitoring, and that the Emperor himself would surely realize this act was nothing but a calculated strategic step. The Marquise noticed Dorothy looked more tired and pale than usual, and asked her anxiously if she had overdrank, so Dorothy replied she just felt some exhaustion. Thanks to this excuse the Marquise provided her, Dorothy was able to leave the birthday party early. After a few days had passed, the fruits of her efforts began to appear. As a large collection of letters and parcels addressed to her arrived at the temple, Dorothy realized her plan to connect with the nobles at the party had indeed succeeded. Gifts and invitations were now reaching her directly, so she ordered the maid to put them aside anywhere. While she was checking the gifts, a servant presented her with a huge bouquet of pure white flowers and told her it was a gift from His Majesty the Emperor. Surprise stunned Dorothy. She never expected Theodore to send her flowers. Doubt immediately took hold of her, and she wondered to herself if this was a subtle warning demanding she not overstep her bounds and whether white flowers symbolize funerals in this world too. The servant handed her a card that was attached to the flowers, only for her to discover that white roses symbolize a new beginning and that lilies of the valley carry a wish for happiness. Dorothy read the short message that wished her this would be an appropriate gift and told her he would see her later that day. Her maid rejoiced greatly, expressing her amazement at the Emperor's romanticism and considered it proof that Dorothy is indeed a special figure, and offered to help her prepare for the meeting immediately. But in Dorothy's eyes, despite all the romantic appearances, this gesture was nothing but a death notice reminding her of the danger surrounding her.